Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Budget Committee. It is November the 29th, 2023, 10:30 a.m., and I will call this meeting to order. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda.
Be it resolved that the agenda for the November 29th, 2023 Budget Committee meeting be approved as presented.
Moved by Deputy Warden Jones, seconded by Councillor Hentz. All in favor? That's carried around. Adoption of the minutes.
Be it resolved that the minutes of the Budget Committee meeting held on November 14th, 2023 be adopted.
Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Sloan and Councillor Hentz will second. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I would remind committee members of disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. We have no delegations, which brings us to section 6, reports and briefings, and 6.1, Director of Financial Services regarding the 2024 budget continued. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning, Mr. Warden, through you to members of the Budget Committee. Today we were continuing delegations or presentations from the departments as the 2024 budget continues. One brief comment, last meeting, we did hear from the Director of Engineering, and he presented a comprehensive overview of operating and capital for engineering services. At that time, the Consumer Price Index for Ontario was not known as for October over October, so we were using the September over September rate of 3.8%. Since then, that number has been released and is now known to be 3.3%. So we have made those adjustments within the next presentations and also within the engineering presentation, which saved approximately $19,000 on that last presentation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The next slide outlines today's departmental delegations that are coming forward with their budgets. We do have a lunch break and a break in there, so we can defer or continue if we wish at the break time. And then additionally, we've added detailed 10-year plans. So while you'll see a high-level overview within the presentations of the departments, you do have the availability to look onto the detailed plans and see the actual line-by-line items that would affect those budgets. So without further ado, Michelle will take over the helm and present her budget for this year.
Great. Thank you, Jen, and through you, Mr. Warden, to members of the Budget Committee. So the first slide for the Homes and Senior Services is just the high-level overview. Of course, we provide the 24/7 person-centered care for 247 beds across our 3 homes. We also supply the support to community residents through the provision of Meals on Wheels, Diners Club, adult day and overnight respite stays. And we do this because there is a legislative requirement within the Fixing Long-Term Care Home Act. And the next slide. So the first question we were asked to speak to is, how did your department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? And so upon review of the results, there was 3 sort of specific points that we wanted to highlight. The results continue to be very supportive of the Elgin County's 3 long-term care homes and the services that we provide. Results support continuing to maintain or increase investments while finding efficiencies. And in fact, the Homes and Senior Services were identified within the top 2 priorities within the survey. There continues to be the recommendation to seek out more provincial funding to avoid increasing taxes. And so reflecting on that, the Homes budgetary approach is reflective of maximizing the provincial funding, and the case mix index scores are funding which aligns with the survey results. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Hard with my mask on. Is that better? Okay, good. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the case mix index. So it's probably a feature or terminology that you may not be familiar with, but for each one of our residents, when they're admitted to our home, we have to do MDS RI assessment. So MDS means minimum data set resident assessment instrument. And so every resident, when they're admitted, we have staff that are specifically trained in doing the assessments of the residents, and that's registered staff, as well as physiotherapy, recreation, dietitian, and others that contribute to that assessment. So that assessment's done on admission and readmission from hospital, as well as with a significant change in status. So it looks at the activities of daily living. What care provisions do we provide for eating, dressing, toileting, transferring? How do we manage their continence levels? And how do we provide, what support is provided for behavior management? And so all of that information is sent to CIHI, the Canadian Institute for Health Information. And from there, that information is received from every long-term care home across the province, and it is scored and sent to the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and that's how we receive our funding. Within our 3 homes, we've done a lot of work on this process to make sure that we're maximizing our funding. And I'm really proud to say that one of our homes is in the top 10% within the province. And the other 2 homes are in very, very close proximity to that. So we are sought after as to, how we're maximizing those scores. And so we do have a consultant that we work with that just analyzes our submissions as we're preparing to submit, make sure we're accurately capturing the care of our residents to make sure that we're getting the funding that we should be for the provision of care of our residents. So that's the first point. In the second slide is, how did your department take into consideration inflationary, back to the other side, inflationary pressures in your department? So that's again speaking to maximizing our case mix index. Also, implementation of pre-approved or anticipated enhancements. So back in 2022, we did receive an announcement from the Ministry of Long-Term Care around the 4 hours of direct care funding. And so that's a very targeted approach to implementation. So we're increasing hours on a very strategic planned approach and looking at that regularly as we do our staffing reports to the Ministry of Long-Term Care, working with finance to make sure we're putting the increases in place, but we're doing so to meet the targets versus an approach of trying to put it all into place early. So there's some opportunity to support the budget as we work through that process. We continue to maximize provincial funding initiatives wherever possible to support our budget. And so I just mentioned 4 as a direct care funding being very targeted. There's also allied health professional funding. So there was an increase to 36 minutes per resident per day, supporting professional growth funding, which is utilized at the homes level to support our education of frontline staff. Medication safety technology funding, which has been in place for the last 3 years, and we do anticipate that will continue. Preceptor resource and education program funding, the PrEP funding, which in 2022, Terrace Lodge realized benefit from that. So all 3 homes applied this year, and it's been very successful, and we'll continue to do that. And then with every one of our contracted services, when we go to RFP, we look very closely at the value adds. And so there's some significant contributions through some of those contract agreements for education for frontline staff, and always looking at the one-time funding initiatives. So as you're aware, we did apply to the local health priority funding and received a bladder scanner for Elgin Manor. This year, about a month ago, there was a diagnostic equipment funding application that we submitted for all 3 homes. We went really high. We are asking for the sky, and we'll see, where our results are, but it will really support the frontline staff in the provision of care and looking at grant opportunities. Not listed on there, there's some of our suppliers that we do get a significant rebate from. So that's another opportunity that supports our budget. And next slide. So how are your department priorities linked back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate or department plans? So looking at the service delivery review, it was clear within that document that we needed to leverage technology. So we've done that this year through the implementation of staff schedule care. And so that's the online scheduling program, as well as the robocall implementation. So 2 of our homes have gone live, and Elgin Manor goes live tomorrow, November 30th. And we'll be working on the implementation of the robocall at the first 2 homes in December, and then in January at the 3rd home. So we're pretty excited about that. It will have an impact on reducing our overtime costs if we can get staff utilizing that program and replacing those absent calls on a more efficient basis. It will also improve staff morale because their scheduling program will be having some additional features that will contribute to work-life balance. And then the second piece is really to continue to advocate for increased funding to offset our municipal contributions. I'm pretty excited to be a member of the Advantage Ontario Board and to have really had a voice in some of the submissions and the conversations with the Ministry of Long-Term Care to support that direct care funding that we've received. And then looking at council's strategic plan. So serving Elgin, growing Elgin, and investing in Elgin. So advocacy for programs and services based on the identified needs and the legislative requirements. And growing Elgin, enhancing quality of life, and maintaining our best practice spotlight organization, designation, and implementing best practice guidelines. And then investing in Elgin, continuing to deliver mandated programs and services. If we look at other corporate documents or our homes departmental plans, really focusing on continuous quality improvement. We're required to submit a quality improvement plan annually to Health Quality Ontario and Ontario Health. And so there are some mandated requirements within that, focusing on falls and emergency visits. But we also really look at how can we streamline our processes, minimize duplication, and enhance recruitment and retention initiatives. So now we'll get down to the meat of the presentation. So Beaubier Villa, looking at the 2024 proposed budget. So on the left-hand side in the green, you'll see the total operating and capital as well as the budget change. And then in the gray, you'll see the 2023 budget is the first column there at the top. The 2023 actuals, which is of November 7th of 2023. And our proposed 2024 budget and the budget change. So if you look at the bottom right corner, you'll see a dollar amount of 4,000, can't read it very well from here, to 248. Okay. So that's what we're asking for 2024 for an increase for Beaubier Villa. So pretty proud of the work that we've done to get to that place. And the next couple of slides will explain how we got there. So the budget summary is looking at revenues. So the provincial increase in funding is actually 413,000. And so the PSW wage enhancement, that's that extra $3 per hour for PSWs. We're also very pleased to see there's an increase in raw food funding of 28,000. And even the additional allied health supporting professional growth. And there's a new funding called resident health and wellbeing funding that we're going to be utilizing to go back to RFP for a social support services worker. And we had originally used the allied health professional funding to implement the IPAC professional lead positions in our homes, but I'm really excited that the ministry is now funding a good portion of that cost. So that's included in the revenues there. If we look at wages and benefits, the PSW wage enhancement, that's a wash with the revenue. We are in negotiations for both of our unions currently, so we put a placeholder for a wage increase within that dollar amount. At Beaubier Villa, over the years, we've been able to manage in the dietary department by budgeting just a little bit under what's scheduled, by not necessarily always replacing every call-in, but we're finding we need those hours and we've gone over in budget. So we're now making an adjustment to reflect the budget to match the schedule. Of course, I spoke earlier of the 4 hours of care. So we have targeted amounts of increase in hours over 2024. By March 31st of 2025, we do have to be at the 4 hours of care. Again, there's the additional allied health, and I did bring a report to council recently in regards to the physiotherapy contract. So that's reflecting that increase there in the wages for physiotherapy. And again, the IPAC lead and different, the difference to allied health funds to pay for the new social worker position that's being funded there. So looking at operational expenses, there is a new ask here. And so that's a disability management consultant. And so the three homes obviously have the largest workflow for us. We have the highest number of staff. And so also have the highest number of staff that are off on leave for a variety of reasons. And that volume of workload is pretty significant for the Human Resources Department. And so having conversations about bringing on some third-party support so that we can have some additional oversight and support to get those employees safely back into the workplace as early as possible. That will result in a budgetary savings. So we're pretty confident that that money will be well spent. So we're looking at, I think, a 1-year trial to start. So some money's been put in place as a placeholder for consideration. I already spoke about the additional allied health, resident health, well-being, social worker costs. There is an amortization decrease adjustment to 2023 actuals reflected here. We've received information from suppliers, so we know that the raw food inflationary increase is going to be pretty significant. So we've estimated a $10,000 increase for raw food for Beaubeer Villa. And the new scheduling software that we've implemented with the robocall does come with a fee. So this annual subscription is looking at $6,000 for Beaubeer Villa. And I've just highlighted the physiotherapy fee increase. And then if we look across each department, there's some minimal or modest increases to general supplies, mileage, and purchase services captured there. For capital expenses, which is outside of what Ryan's going to speak to as well, but we have, in 2014, we had a phone system that was implemented into Beaubeer Villa, which is no longer, there's no replacement parts, and that system is no longer going to be able to meet our needs. So initial estimates of cost to replace that is $70,000. The dryer also needs replacement, starting to have issues with that. And there's some additional kitchen equipment needing to be replaced, a steam table and a couple other minor items. So moving on to Elgin Manor, again, so on the left-hand side in the green, you see the total operating and capital and the budget change across the top of the columns for the 2023 budget and the actuals as of November 7th. And our proposed budget with the bottom right-hand corner being $38,615 for an ask for the 2024 Elgin Manor proposed budget. In the same fashion, we'll go through how do we arrive at that number. So looking at the revenues for provincial Ontario increase in funding, a good size there, $840,000. The PSW wage enhancement, same items of increase in raw food and the IPAC lead personnel funding, the allied health, just reflecting the one-time bladder scanner grant. But unique to Elgin Manor is the end of the building compliance premium. So that number is reflected there. And then just walking through wages and benefits, again, a wash of the PSW wage enhancement as identified in the revenues. Again, negotiations. So there's a placeholder for wage increase. Again, the direct care hours, very targeted approach. In 2023, we're actually, based on what we had budgeted, we were able to go a little bit lower as we were doing the staffing reports. So we'll continue to monitor that carefully, but we think we have it solidified for 2024. And again, just the same sort of indicators that we discussed for Beaubeer Villa. So operational expenses, there's a dollar amount there for the disability management consultant. There's actually an amortization increase adjustment for Elgin Manor. The raw food inflationary increase is higher, and it's what's been identified by our suppliers as being an accurate number. Again, the allied health, the staff schedule care subscription, the physiotherapy increase, and similar areas, general supplies, mileage, and purchase services across all departments, resulting in an increase there. Capital expenses. The phone system is the same one at Elgin Manor, and it's a larger home, so the cost is a little bit higher there. For nursing equipment, we're at a stage where we needed to add a little bit more money for mechanical lift replacement in this year, and a blanket warmer. And we had that very, very small fire at Elgin Manor this year in one of the utility rooms, and the sterilizer was impacted, so that piece of equipment needs to be replaced.
Similar to Bovier Villa, we have additional kitchen equipment that needs to be replaced, a couple of steamers, and just reflecting the expenses of the bladder scanner there. So moving on to Terrace Lodge. So similar, I won't go through all the headers, but the bottom right-hand corner, instead of an ask, we actually are reflecting a savings here for Terrace Lodge of $72,600. And there's two reasons for that. One is because we're in the middle of a redevelopment project, so we don't have those capital equipment costs that the other two homes are looking at, because we are actually replacing a lot of equipment as we move through the project. So those are included in the Terrace Lodge redevelopment project costs, as well as larger homes typically are a little bit more efficient than the smaller homes. So those are the two reasons identified, but we'll walk through the next couple of slides. I won't go through this in great detail. Again, it's just, the increase in funding, which is a nice size there, the wage enhancements for PSW, raw food, IPAC. What's different here at the bottom of the revenues is for 2023, the team identified a high intensity need funding line item that we didn't actually need that full amount. So we've just made the adjustment here at Terrace Lodge to reflect and come in line with the other two homes. And then under wages and benefits, similar to the other two homes with the dollar figures reflected there. And the next slide. So operational expenses, again, the same disability management consultant costs, raw food, allied health, staff schedule care, physio. The item that's different in this at Terrace Lodge is bed replacement cycle started earlier at Terrace Lodge. So we're looking at replacing a few of the beds and mattresses in 2024. And as mentioned earlier, the capital expenses, not identifying any equipment there for the departments based on the redevelopment project. So the recommendation is that the Homes and Senior Services operating and capital budget as presented today be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date. And I'm not sure if we're taking questions after each session, so happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Michelle. It's actually a fairly, if I would characterize it, a benign looking budget. A lot of offsets, and it looks good. And with the only I guess you could say new item coming on is your disability management consultant, which has the potential for labor saving. And I get that. Is there any questions from any member of the committee? Yes. Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to Michelle. I would like to congratulate you too. It's that was refreshing, I guess. I guess my question with the phone systems you have to put in, can't go back to the old black rotary dial.
Can't get parts.
Can't get part size, yeah, I suppose.
Great question. We wish, I guess, but yeah, technology and connection to the nurse call systems, those pieces are important. Thanks.
Be it resolved that the Homes and Senior Services operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Sorry about that. There was a motion and I was looking for a mover and seconder, and Deputy Warden Jones graciously moved it, and I noticed that you looked like you're willing to second it, Councillor Hens. There we go. So all in favor of the motion? Perhaps that's right. Councillor Sloan, are you, can we either see you or get a recorded vote? We still have a 3. We still have a carried. Yeah. All right. Let's mark it as carried. Thank you. Now remember to turn my mic on. Moving on with section 6.3, manager of corporate facilities 2024 budget presentation. You're up, Brian. Thank you.
Good morning. Through you, Mr. Warden, to the Budget Committee. So my budget is comprised of 7 county-owned facilities, the County Administration Building, the Heritage Center, the Provincial Offenses Building, 3 long-term care homes, Bobia Villa, Elgin Manor, and Terrace Lodge, and 6 corporate facilities. We have 4 EMS ambulance stations, the Elgin Manor wastewater treatment station, as well as White Station Garage on Fruit Ridge Road. Why we do it, ensuring the health and safety of all staff and tenants, residents and visitors that come to our that visit our facilities. As well, maintaining public owned facilities at the lowest life cycle costs while adhering to Employment Standards Act, AODA, and Fixing Long-Term Care Act. How did your department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? Very similar to Michelle's survey. We had quite a few results coming back indicating that the long-term care homes wanted further support. So we've put more resources in that area. How did your department take in consideration inflationary pressures in your department? Project estimates presented within the in the 10-year capital plan have utilized the most recent 2023 construction unit rates, and that experienced by the county. Approximately every 7 years, the county conducts building condition assessments of all of its facilities, and from there we are able to put together a life cycle chart and determine the frequency on replacement of all of our major assets. Project costs in future years have also been inflated by a 2% compounded annual interest rate. This is historical rate for inflation and may be adjusted based upon future markets and conditions. How are your departmental prioritized linked back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate department plans? For the service delivery review, service contracts are reviewed on an ongoing basis. And we also made sure that they coincide with the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. We conduct thorough inspections with contractors and our own maintenance staff to prevent and mitigate any long-term issues. Council's strategic plan, infrastructure investments are designed and proposed to meet all the goals of Elgin's strategic plan. Currently, Terrace Lodge is undergoing a major redevelopment project. It's bringing it from a Class C to a Class A home. And then other documents, plans adhere to the county's assessment plan and policy. How do we derive our budget? So the building condition assessments basically take every piece of asset, they inspect it, and they give it a life cycle. Based upon the results from our third-party consultant, we use that information. We derive our 10-year capital plan. Once we have a 10-year capital, once it's put in our 10-year capital plan, we estimate that we're going to replace that asset that year. But in conjunction with that, we also have all of our HVAC equipment, which is our largest asset to be replaced on an ongoing basis. We also do semi-annual inspections. Based upon the results of these semi-annual inspections, they all get cataloged into our WorkSub software as our assets as well as our work orders and PMs. So from there, we have the option and to move up or further back and push back asset replacements and change the cycle. So based upon the needs and to make sure that we maintain the compliance for the temperature of the rooms for the homes and all the other stuff, that we make sure we do it in time. When replacing capital assets, energy conservation and life cycle costings are key contributing factors in choosing products. We're doing lights this year, and there's huge energy rebates that we're looking at as well. Requests from staff and tenants are also considered when developing the capital plan. Here's our capital budget for Beaubier Villa. I'll talk about the minor capital project because it's on every and it's a large chunk of money. It's on every budget. So that line item will be spent in conjunction with Michelle's, and it's for fall prevention, infection control, and minor capital projects. So you'll notice that that value there on every home's budget. So that's why that's there. And for Beaubier Villa, our largest replacement that we're doing next year is the HVAC for the AAG refurbishment. There's 3 wings at Beaubier Villa, and each wing has a air handling unit. We were supposed to replace them all. To replace them, we would have to remove the existing roof where the air handling unit installed. We had originally allocated 600,000. We're going to do a refurbishment on them. They're in pretty decent shape. So we're going to redo all the controls and refurbish them for around 200,000 and get another 20 years out of them. So capital costs there are about $397,798. For Elgin Manor, it's our largest. We have a large budget here. This one's our largest budget for this year because it's not going through a redevelopment project, and we have a kitchen. So under HVAC replacements, we have $205,000 allocated for this. We have 4 rooftop units that need to be replaced. 3 rooftop units and an air handling unit. The air handling unit was supposed to be replaced in 2021. Due to its condition, it was pushed out. So we're moving that to 2024. And so that's what's brought that number higher. As well in there, we've also added resident room blinds, an $80,000 line item. The UV rays on the blinds are deteriorating and we're having them fall apart. It was not captured on the BCA. So that's also on there. And we've also added plumbing, resident room, toilets, and faucets. So the home's approximately 20 years old. All the toilets are having issues. We can't get common spare parts for them anymore. And it's our maintenance person's, they stopped manufacturing the toilet. So it's our maintenance largest task is maintaining these toilets. So we're going through and going to replace all of the toilets and faucets in all the resident rooms. Our total budget for for Elgin Manor is $771,997. For Terrace Lodge, it's pretty consistent. Our capital budgets based on for each home, they change based upon the BCA. For Terrace Lodge, the one that's kind of sticks out is the WALA encapsulate and DSS survey. So based upon the findings of the asbestos and trying to maintain and mitigate the Ministry of Labor issues for the asbestos, what we plan to do is start encapsulating some of the dry walls that have asbestos in them. So we've allocated $75,000 for walls encapsulation and to mitigate that risk. That budget there is $403,830. The administration building, the largest hitter here will be the elevator addition. We've gone through approximately 50 change orders on the elevator addition. So we're adding $200,000 to the budget for the administration building to finish the project off and to offset some of the change orders. We're putting $200,000 in there so we don't have to come back to council and ask for more money. We're hoping there's going to be a surplus at the end. For corporate facilities, that budget there had $349,000 for capital expenditures. Corporate facilities, that's for the 4 ambulance base stations, the Elgin Manor wastewater treatment plant as well as White Station Garage. There's no capital that actually has to be spent this year. We're allocating $25,000 for designated survey substances. So during our training on our asbestos this summer, we learned that we need to have a DSSS survey, designated substance survey for all county-owned facilities. And it's basically someone's gonna come in, sample all the different products used within a facility to ensure that there's no ACMs or asbestos in the building products. And those buildings, due to the age, they're well within the means. It's a ministry requirement just to have a designated substance survey on hand. So we're gonna conduct those next year. Our 10-year plan is fairly consistent with the budget approximately for all corporate facility assets, approximately just under $5 million. You'll notice spikes in years 2025 and 2026. The big spike in 2025 is for the refurbishment of the refurbishment of the brick, either putting a cladding on top and window replacement for this administration building. And then you'll notice in 2026, there's a spike for Beaubier Villa, and that is for the sloped roof replacement. This slide summarizes all those the budgets we just went over in high level for all those all the buildings. For all corporate facilities in 2024 and capital expenditures, there's $1,947,625. These slides are this slide here is very similar to what Michelle just presented. It's showing the wages along with all the operating expenses. And you'll notice that Beaubier Villa is gone down of $109,950 from years 2023 to 2024. And the main reason for that is differences in capital projects. And the next slide, I think it summarizes the differences. So, sorry, I gotta switch pages, I can't see. Province Ontario increases the new minor capital funding, so it's a difference of $97,000. Wage and benefit change of 2.5%. So it's $2,700. Operational expenses increase in mileage, so we've increased that to $1,500. An increase in purchase services just due to inflation of $2,500.
Have a partial
And,
register. Why do we need a new one?
And an increase in utilities of $5,000. Capital expenses decreased for prior years, requests including adult day spa tub room. So those humidifiers have been done, so that's closed out. And these other projects, the increase there is $301,000, and that's for including mechanical replacements and exterior painting. And then the other increase is the minor capital funding for Beaubier Villa. On to Elgin Manor. You'll notice there that the difference from 2023 to 2024 is $165,650. The next slide summarizes and captures all the different changes. So the revenues change as well as the wages, and the operational expenses are all the same as Beaubier Villa for change points. The decrease is we've done our capital expenditures outlined, and that's what the decrease is for that $523,000. The major increase next year is that slide that summarizes all the major increases, and that's totaling $651,000, and the minor capital of $121,000. For Terrace Lodge, it's from 2023 to 2024, it drops by $52,827, and the summarization is on the next slide. Revenues, wages, and benefits and operational expenses all change, and our capital projects obviously are changing for the year, and there's no major capital project for next year at Terrace Lodge. And for the administration building, you'll notice there's a large difference from 23 to 24, $3,491,837. That large portion of money was for the elevator addition. The elevator addition's coming to an end, and that's why it's a large difference in capital. And as well with the administration building, revenues, wages, and operational expenses have all increased due to inflation, and capital expenses. Just our major thing there was our putting $200,000 in towards our elevator addition. And lastly, that the corporate facilities operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Ryan. Again, very informative. Does the committee have any questions for Ryan? Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to Ryan. I guess with regards to the renovations on the administration building over the past 3 years.
Yep.
Is anybody keeping a running tally on what this has all cost when we're done?
We are not actually keeping a running tally. I started here just over a year ago, and the project was under ongoing. We are trying to get all of our spending under control and making proper decisions on what projects are going to happen. You did notice, or I presented the windows and doors is probably one of the last large projects that has to happen at this building. The brick's in pretty tough shape, so it is starting to spallate and come down. And the windows, they're of a 1984 vintage. So the main reason for me putting further capital into this building will be for energy savings. Hopefully I answered your question, but no, there is no current running tally.
Okay, thank you. At some point, I'm going to ask for that.
Well, I think it's prudent because there has been considerable resources that have been put into this building, and you know, we know it's an old building that takes it does take that kind of investment if we're going to bring it up to standards. The elevators surprised me of what the cost was on to do them, and Jen, you've got some answers for us.
Finance will certainly provide those numbers when they're asked for, so.
Okay, consider them.
We
asked.
do have that information.
I was gonna say, consider them asked for. Yeah, Grant?
I just know what second floor on the POA building was going to cost us, and we're well past that already.
I don't know, are we? Yeah, it could be, very much, could be.
The elevators have been significant, and a significant add to this building, so.
They have. Any questions from committee members? Hens? Yes, committee, yeah, Councillor Hens.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I have a question for Ryan on the staffing levels at our homes. In your report, wages and benefits, I would just like to know how many staff are at each facility in our homes in this report.
Currently, we have allocated one facilities maintenance person for each home, and there's one maintenance person on staff for the administration building. So there's 4 in total maintenance people. And then under my umbrella as well, I have a building science technologist.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any additional questions from anyone? Again, the only thing that I saw that was perhaps, I appreciate the refurbishment of the air handling unit at Beauvier rather than a replacement. It's a $400,000 savings, as you've indicated. The fact that the air handling and HVAC unit at, I believe was Elgin Management put off for a couple of years. I get it, but I certainly appreciate staff being able to recognize the life cycle and stretch the use of these facilities as long as they can. And then the designated substance survey. And if this is a requirement, and this is across all the facilities, it's not that expensive to do, I would assume. And it puts us in line legislatively. So those are my comments. Okay, thank you, Ryan. Jenna?
Be it resolved that the corporate facilities operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Counselor Hentz and Deputy Warden Jones, thank you. All in favor? All carried, thank you. 6.4, Director of Human Resources, 2024 budget presentation. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you to members of the Budget Committee. The first slide we have here for HR provides an overview of the HR departmental functions, our responsibilities, and our overall purpose. So we see our overarching purpose as ensuring the needs of both employees and the corporation are met, ensuring effective and efficient service delivery to county residents. So we do work closely with all departments and external stakeholders to support services to the residents. And over the years, HR has increasingly become a strategic business partner within the organization. Next slide, we look at how we took into consideration the 2024 budget survey results. So after reviewing all of the feedback and comments within the survey, our department took into consideration those that related to the HR function. And some were comments pertaining to administration costs, including salaries paid to administrative and management staff. And these relate to HR's overall responsibility for compensation planning. The majority of respondents did indicate the percentage of the budget allocated to administration was appropriate. And there was a general desire to maintain service levels across the county, and in some cases enhance services while keeping tax increases flat or minimal. And in order to maintain service levels, the county must remain competitive in the talent attraction and retention market, meaning market competitive salaries, benefits, and pensions are essential. And although there were some comments indicating salaries, benefits, and pensions are too high, and or that we are overstaffed, there was a comprehensive compensation plan review done in 2022, which indicated we are paying at the 50th percentile to comparators, which matches our pay policy at this time. And given recruitment and retention challenges, these do tell a different story. So there is an indication that we haven't kept up with the private sector and some other municipalities who are actually paying at instead the 60th or 65th percentile in the area of compensation. We do seek low and no cost ways of enhancing the employment experience because improving recruitment and retention levers, we know that salary isn't always the top determining factor. So we are always working on those other factors to recruit and retain staff that aren't as costly as compensation. And also workloads do increase with growth across the county and increasing legislated requirements. And staffing increases really have not kept pace with these increased demands overall. Benefit plans have also not kept pace with the market. We haven't recommended enhancements due to the cost associated with benefit plans. Instead, again, we're looking for areas where we can save or repurpose dollars to enhance value to staff. HR is seeking to gain efficiencies by utilizing software, for example, and to share services with local municipalities where we can offer service at a better cost and share expertise. The next slide, we look at how we took into consideration inflationary pressures. So we have not historically recommended wage increases nor other budgetary items to keep pace with annual inflation rates. HR does make conservative recommendations to council annually, and these are based on internal and external comparators, the market, and economic trends. We do take a strategic approach to collective bargaining where we're seeking ways to balance increases with savings elsewhere or efficiencies elsewhere. In response to our increasing, escalating recruitment and retention challenges, we're seeking lower, no-cost methods of improving the employment experience, as mentioned earlier. So looking at progressive things like adding flexibility, we do know that that's very important to to staff these days. We get that feedback frequently, so we're evaluating flexibility options, reviewing the benefit plan across all of our local municipal partners, so collaborating in that area, looking to modernize our plans and restructure so that we're not paying for things that aren't being used and valued by staff, but rather paying for things that staff will benefit from, and looking to gain economies of scale by collaborating with all 8 of us across the county. And ultimately, in recent years, the HR's budget has been underspent annually due to cost care or close care regarding spending and constantly seeking savings and lower no-cost alternatives. Next slide. So how our departmental priorities link back to either the service delivery review or council's strategic plan and other plans across the county. So directly aligned with the service delivery review is the development of an HR shared service relationship and agreement with interested local municipal partners, so with Elgin's 7 locals, and implementation of the new human capital management software, which has been ongoing for about a year and a half now, and we're getting very close to being fully implemented. Parts are already live and functioning very well. And once we're fully functioning in that, we hope to gain efficiencies as were indicated in the service delivery review as the goal of that project. And then relating back to council's strategic plan, we have had ongoing since 2020, 2021, health, human resources, recruitment and retention initiatives, and corporate culture improvement initiatives also. So these include things like leadership training and development, the HR policy review and amendment. We've taken on quite a few HR policies that have come back to council to update those, modernize those, and make sure they're compliant with current legislation and also with the corporate culture that we want to be building. And as well as ongoing development of health and wellness and DEI initiatives, all related to corporate culture there. And under other areas, so based on staff feedback, we are developing a new performance management tool within the human capital management system. So that's going to be a much more efficient process than the current paper-based process that we have now, and everything will be integrated into the system, make it less onerous for management to be giving those performance reviews, because we hear from staff that they are valued and important. So that's something that will be ready to go start of the new year. Recommendation and leadership of the RFP process for the benefit plan consultant. So we're working together with our locals there, with HR at the county leading that process. And then collective bargaining processes. We always have the ratepayer at the center of our proposals, and we aim for agreements which are fair to employees and sustainable for the taxpayer. Ongoing challenges we're addressing in HR include escalating healthcare insurance costs, increasing number and complexity of disability claims, and recruitment and retention becoming increasingly challenging, which we did know would be the case years ago, that when we knew qualified staff coming in, we're not going to keep pace with the retirements that were occurring, and we're right in the middle of that now. So that's partly why a lot of our initiatives are related to recruitment and retention. And then the next slide is the one where you can see the numbers. So the majority of HR operating budget is for departmental wages and benefits, given that we are a service-based department. We are seeing loss of revenue from the Middlesex accessibility contract, which used to cover half of the cost of that position. And now they're doing those services in-house. We have plans to replace the accessibility coordinator role with a manager level position, so that we can continue to offer and broaden on the accessibility DEI front. There's still a desire across our 7 local municipalities to collaborate in that area and have the county continue to offer that service and broaden that, and as well as broadening HR services in general. And the piece there is also, we do need a learning management system. We've been using free software called Moodle for years, And it is failing us now. It's not working, but when it's a free software, there's no service behind it to help us. And it's very important that we're maintaining good records when it comes to employee training, because much of the training is legislated. And if the ministry's on site, they want to see records of that. So we are reviewing software options, and looks like it will cost about $6,000 a year to have that. We did look into whether Dayforce could handle that, and they didn't have as effective a strategy for a learning management system as we would need. And next slide. So in an overall summary, we are making efforts to shore up the loss of the Middlesex accessibility revenue by enhancing shared service provision to our local municipalities, which has been a work in progress, and we were always planning on having to review resources alongside of being able to broaden the service provision. And I've said a bunch of that. We want to continue with the organizational culture work throughout. It has been ongoing since 2021, but as we all know, culture doesn't change overnight. We need to continue efforts for the long term there to benefit the organization. And overall, our plan is to maintain and in some areas enhance service levels to support accelerating change and growth across the county and partner services and operations. Lastly is the recommendation. So recommendation is that human resources operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date. And we do hope to initiate recruitment for a manager position early in the new year in order to limit the gap in service provision there. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Amy, for that report. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. I'll formulate one in my mind as I go. Any questions for Amy on the HR? Yes, Councillor Hens?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My question to Amy is, what capacity is built into your budget to offer more assistance to the local municipal partners? Or are we still inventing this or trying to come up with a program where you can offer more assistance to us on
Thank you,
HR
Councillor.
issues?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And through the warden. So a big part of the proposal to hire in a manager position is so that we can continue to be able to take on the project. And we've done basically a trial for 3 or 4 years of responding to requests for assistance from our 7 local municipalities when needed to determine what skill sets would be needed. And it's very clear at this time that we do require a more senior level HR skill set to help, because the requests for assistance relate to workplace investigations, contentious issues, collective bargaining, labor relations issues. So we do really need broader skill set there at the county to be able to continue to take on those more significant items, and also wanting to continue to just collaborate in general on policy issues and work closely together. So I'd say the manager position is largely meant to be able to continue to support the local municipalities.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sloan?
Amy, how many people are in your department?
We have 6 in our department, and it will be 5 after Thursday with the loss of the accessibility coordinator position.
Okay, thanks for that. And if you had to go with your last year's budget instead of the 12% increase, what would that look like to the average person? So the
Sorry.
831,000 versus the $100,000 addition. Tell me how 2024 would look like with HR being run at the budget that you had last year.
Thank you. I would say the biggest impact would be our ability to continue to share services, because rolled into that is continuing to provide the accessibility, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and HR shared service provision are rolled into that role change. So amending, and with the loss of the Middlesex revenue, we're going to be trying to shore that up by having a cost recovery relationship for HR shared services broadly. So what it would look like ultimately is that we wouldn't be able to offer the level of service that's being requested at this time.
Thanks, Amy. Is there ever any consideration giving to multi-year in the sense of if this was done, if it was a percentage in 2024 and 2025, as opposed to it being what's a relatively substantial increase in 1 year? Just a question through you, Warden. Thank you.
Are you, just to clarify, Councillor Sloan, are you talking about perhaps funding the increase over 2-year time frame over the immediate need?
Well, first of all, yes, so through you, Warden, we don't know the metrics of when the lower tiers are asking for help. We don't know when they're asking or what they're asking for. So respectfully, if there's a demand and we're looking at filling a role or having a budget increase of approximately 12%, I'm just curious about, I mean, that's a relatively large and what I would call a significant increase. So on the other side, what if this could be done in stages versus all at once? And second of all, we talk about how we're billing out in certain areas, or it sounds like, to the lower municipality or the lower tiers. I know we do that for legal. We have a shared service agreement where we pay through Central Elgin, I think, for law help from Mr. Loeb and his team. But on HR, we're hearing about there's a need for the service, but I don't exactly know what the need is and if there's metrics to back it up. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Do you want to speak to that, Don?
Thank you, Warden. I'll take the first part of it, but in direct answer to your question, the local CAOs have been meeting with the members of our leadership team to try and define more clearly what type of support is going to be required. So some of them are things like the accessibility. You can project that. We know that there's legislative requirements. We can actually work with people to get those done. A lot of the things are not as easy to predict. So an example of an investigation. So Amy or somebody that we might be hiring as a manager might come in and do an employee investigation, and that might take many hours. That's the sort of activity that we would hope to be able to bill back to the local municipalities. On a regular basis, Amy's receives calls, as do other members of our management team, for general advice and direction, or, you know, sharing some strategies and so on. The expectation is that we would not be billing that back. That sort of help to members of the family, so to say. There's some things that sort of lie in the middle of those things, like contract negotiations, where you can anticipate that a contract's going to be up in, you know, a given year. How long the negotiations are going to take is very difficult to predict. But if Amy's asked, like she has been in Malahide, to go and participate in that type of negotiation, then there would be an expectation we'd have to be able to cover part of those costs, or if not all of the costs. So trying to answer your question as directly as I can, but that's some of the things that Amy's having to juggle when she's, you know, putting forward a number. And I think over the course of the next year or two, we'll develop a database like we have with legal services, where you can be a little bit more predictive in terms of what the annual costs would be and then what the revenues would be. And as Amy's described, we're trying to do this in a way that's the best overall deal for the ratepayer. We recognize that they're the same ones paying our salaries and costs as they are for the local municipalities. I hope we've answered your question. If not, I think maybe Amy and I can try to flesh that out.
Okay. And just on that, thanks very much, Don and Amy. Question, what's our multiple for an employee? Like if is it 1.3, 1.4? I just was curious what it is. Thank you.
So meaning the benefit cost on top of salary?
Yes, please. Thank you. Through you, Warden.
Finance will have to confirm, but I think it's about 23%, 28%. when adding in all of the ESA costs on top of that, pension and benefits on top of wages is about 28%.
So 28% including all costs and pension. Thank you.
Okay, Amy, related to the benefits side of it. And it's a general question I'm just going to ask. We have found at Bayham that some of our more recent hires don't seem to have very much interest in the benefits side, but they're looking cash in hand. Are you experiencing the same thing at the county level with new hires, particularly younger people?
It's a good question. We haven't experienced that, and especially when it's fully employer funded. I've seen it in the private sector where employees have to pay into the benefit plan. They request instead to opt out and save the money, but not receive compensation. In a lot of collective agreements, part-time staff have a benefits in lieu amount that can be quite valuable to individuals who don't value the benefits plan. But the way our plan's designed right now is, and the risk sharing format, when it's a full-time person, they do have to be on the benefit plan. There's not really options to opt in and opt out, but that's something we want to review through the RFP process, getting a broker and a contract with a broker where we can get some assistance with those evaluations.
Well, thank you for that. One more thing to just add into the soup mix here. The requirement, of course, the argument was brought to council, and council's acquiesced to the idea of looking or enhancing the department through a manager in your group. Maybe it's not fair to ask, but if this was in terms of contracted service rather than employee, this would be something that I would assume would cost the county more, would it not?
Yes, we've done the analysis on our cost recovery model versus what consultants and consulting fees would be, and it would definitely be more cost effective to have a person in-house that's offering service and taking on workload at the county. Unless, I think what Councillor Sloan was talking about, some kind of easing into it, which to me, the only option to do that would be to start on a part-time basis, have a part-time consultant and in that case, I think the only thing we could have somebody doing is the accessibility DEI component, because that's the piece we're losing right now, which is not a full-time need across the county, but it is a need that we don't have resources for.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Southwold's experience has been, and we use the Elgin County for a lot of resources, being a small municipality, and we found significant cost savings over the last 3 or 4 years of legal, human resources. I think we're finding with our managers or our higher paid employees that they move a lot, and quite often we do need help with the hiring process, and you never know when that's going to happen. And right now we're in contract negotiations with our exterior employees, and I think Amy is involved in that one to some extent. They're here this morning, actually. So I do value the work that they do.
I concur with you, and that's the same experience we have in Bayham as well. We prevailed upon not only the legal team, but also upon Amy and her expertise on several different occasions. And yeah, I think it gets down to the benefits principle. If you're going to use it, we're going to have to compensate at the local level for it. So I have no objection to that model. Don?
Just one other thing to put up for the budget committee and further to council. The management team and the local CAOs have talked about that working in both directions. If there are local expertise that can be shared, we would be promoting that as well, whether it's local municipalities working together, which I know they already are looking at, or if you've got some specialized expertise, I think, we'd be happy to access that as well. But I think it goes back to the point that Councillor Sloan was making is, how do we keep the overall cost contained and, use the most cost effective way possible. I think just want to put that out there, that it does work in both directions from our perspective, and we support that as a administration. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Don. That's actually a very interesting concept. And is it something that you've considered tapping perhaps some of the local expertise that do have their in-house HR? We don't have it in BAM, but I believe Elmer does. I think Malahide does, Central Elgin does, or did. I don't know. It's just find us the best cost-effective solution. That's all we ask. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Jenna, please.
Be it resolved that the Human Resources operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Deputy Warden Jones, Counselor Hentz. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Moving on with 6.5, Director of Community and Cultural Services, Community and Cultural Services 2024 budget presentation. Brian, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Warden, and through you to the Budget Committee. So as far as who we are, our department does encompass the three distinct functions as described on the slide and under a central administration. Okay, regarding the budget survey, we are certainly very attuned to the feedback that was received through the survey, and we actively assist in promoting the survey to our residents. The chief takeaway here is that the majority of respondents expressed support for maintaining current funding levels, and our proposed budget does just that. Regarding the inflationary pressures, for the library specifically, we not only need to manage inflationary pressures, which are significant on our materials, but also we have US dollar considerations on a lot of our materials because they are, especially the e-resources sourced out of the United States. So we're constantly monitoring market trends and allocating as the year goes on, and often as we get into the year, we can see certain trends that are already becoming a reality, and therefore have to adjust our buying levels. But we did bring to council a 10-year plan for library materials and electronic resources in 2022, and we are sticking to that plan and managing our resources within that. Regarding other links to other plans, in terms of the service delivery review, we continue a strong collaborative partnership with St. Thomas Public Library, particularly with our collections buying decisions, which therefore increases the offerings we can make available to our patrons in both the city and the county due to our longstanding reciprocal agreement. So we're not duplicating what they're buying, especially when it comes to e-resources. So again, when it comes to ebooks, they offer cloud library. We offer our Overdrive Libby service, and therefore patrons can have the best of both. In terms of council strategic plan, 2023 was the first full year of our revised leasing framework for our library facilities that works with LMPs and now applies to all 10 branches for the first time. And so revenue back to the municipalities in 2023 was $17 per square foot. And this amount will increase in 2024 by the rate of CPI, sorry. We have CPR training coming up in the next couple of weeks, so that's kind of on my mind. CPI, so that payment based on the numbers that finance provide, I believe will go up to about $17, just over $17.50 in 2024. The budget numbers here for all three functions and really fall into three major buckets in terms of our department, that is wages, collections, and leases. And under museum, I just want you to note that that amount under memberships has been increased by $10,000 to reflect the request from the St. Thomas Elgin Public Art Center, which I know is also a matter under budget committee consideration. So that placeholder has been put into the 2024 museum budget. Keep going. All right, so to summarize, we are not proposing any new spending initiatives in 2024. We will have fully implemented our fine-free initiative and mitigated the $8,000 of revenue impact that we projected when we started into this process, and that is being realized as part of that. We continue to be very fortunate in terms of the level of donations that we receive that have helped to offset that revenue impact. You know, we work very hard on securing those donations and ensuring that the revenue stream is going to mitigate the impact that the fine-free initiative, that initiative, and Natalie will be bringing a report forward to recommend phase 3 of that initiative in 2024, which will see it fully implemented. And again, that revenue impact fully mitigated in our budget. So with that, I bring forward our budget for your consideration.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Brian. Yeah, kind of tight again. Any questions from members of the committee? I will make comment on one initiative I became aware of. My wife is actually the patron of the library, who goes back and forth all the time, and she was informing me of a cost-saving measure that you've already implemented, which I wasn't aware of. If it's a borrowed item, a book from an interlibrary loan, and she dropped it off at Port Burwell rather than Stratford, it stays in Port Burwell until it's called for. It's not immediately picked up and moved. I think that's a wise thing. I mean, you've got the software in place to track it. Makes a lot of sense rather than sending the car down to move it and just get it back to where it belonged in the first place. So I congratulate you on that. Minor thing, but still credit where credit's due. It needs to be spoken to.
I'll comment on that, Ms. Warden. I mean, the van service that we run is part of the efficiencies because we were able to transit materials without having to buy one copy for each branch. So
Yeah.
in and of itself, it pays for itself as it rolls because we are meeting demand where it is, but otherwise it stays where it's, you know, where it's dropped off.
Yeah, no, so thank you for that. Again, second call out there for any other questions from the library service. Yes, Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Warden. No, just through you to Brian, just a off-topic question. My wife received a book that it's a brand new book, author that we actually know locally. And she was wondering how she would give it to the library, if it has to go through a critiquing process or how that work is.
Yeah, we will review it. Our library technicians will review it through Natalie under our collection development policy, which council actually just updated. And so the two techs will look at the item, and then they will determine if it fits the collection development policy, and then ultimately link it into the catalog to be put into the branch.
Okay, any questions from the west? Apparently not. This is going along too smooth and too quick. Jenna, you have a motion for us?
Be it resolved that the Elgin County Library, Elgin County Museum, and Elgin County Archives operating and capital budgets as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Sloan will move. Deputy Warden Jones will second. All in favor? That's carried. Back, we were left off with Director of Legal Services, Provincial Offenses Administration. If I get to repeat that.
Thank you, Warden. I'm just waiting for the presentation to come up on screen and then I'll commence. Thank you, Stephanie. So I'm here to present the Provincial Offenses Administration budget. Before I do that, I'll just say thank you. I'd gone over this with Deanna in advance, our court services manager, who experiences the day-to-day reality of operating the courts more than I do. But I'm the one here presenting this before you today. So in terms of who the Provincial Offences Administration is. They're the folks that operate the Provincial Offences Court building that's just to the south of us, and they perform all of the functions that are necessary essentially to operate a court. And so they're responsible for scheduling hearings at the court, delivering all necessary notices, clerking the courts, communicating with the Justice of the Peace, the full gamut of administering provincial offenses. In terms of why it is done, it is mandated by the province of Ontario that Elgin County, as the upper tier in the region, is responsible for the delivery of provincial offences administration. And that's done technically through a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of the Attorney General. That said, and as council is likely aware, about 20 years ago, that memorandum of understanding is not squarely optional, but we're required by legislation to do it. So it's a mandated service from the province. It also includes the city of St. Thomas's provincial offenses as well. So it's the entire geographic region of the county, but also the city of St. Thomas's provincial offenses. Go to the next slide there. So how did the department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? So the applicable questions were with regard to government services. And there was a change of 7% to appropriate levels of spending on government services and plus 2% to too little on government services over 2023. Sorry, over the 2023 results. The operation of the POA court in most years is paid for through the fine revenue that is collected after folks are convicted. So that isn't necessarily a guarantee in any given year, but historically that has been the case, although there were some ripples during what I'll call the COVID period because of just the nature of the lowering of numbers of provincial offenses and then the court shutdowns during that time. When there is positive revenue, that is then dispersed to the local municipal partners, and that's in accordance with the distribution of funds formula that was agreed upon when Elgin County took over the courts. And the last piece, and it'll reappear on some future slides, is there's no proposed capital or operational spending increases for provincial offences administration other than just inflationary increases for wages and benefits as well as rent. Next slide there. So in terms of inflationary pressures, again, it's just the wages and benefits and rent. The operation of the court is largely human service delivery. So the software that's used is provincially mandated, essentially, like you have to use ICON and those sorts of things. So we use those sorts of things and we'll continue doing so. The only item that I'm aware of that may come up over time is we've been experiencing a bit of issue with some of the AV stuff for Zoom Court. That said, nothing's broken. So there's nothing in this budget that's a big expenditure. And I'm aware the county has quite a number of IT needs. So that this will be put on a list of where it fits priority wise in terms of IT hardware. So it's not specifically in the POA budget, but there has been some recognition that some of the sound issues when we're trying to get transcriptions or when Zoom Court's going on, we may just look into it and find out if it's a tweak or if we need to do something like buy microphones. Next slide there. So how are the departmental priorities linked back to the service delivery review, strategic plan, and other corporate documents? So in terms of the SDR, it's a mandated program. And essentially we run it on a very lean staff. So in my view, although I've only sort of recently taken sort of carriage and oversight of looking after POA, it's optimized to the extent possible. We have a small number of staff. They're very good at sort of arranging vacation coverage and whatnot during the summer. And the rhythms of the work, it seems appropriately staffed, but certainly there's no excess there. In terms of council's strategic plan, the delivery of POA aligns with the strategic goal of ensuring alignment of current programs with community need, as well as delivering mandated programs and services efficiently and effectively. That just links back to what I said a moment ago. I think it's appropriately staffed and it's a required mandated service delivery. And then in terms of other corporate documents, it's in line with what I described earlier, which is the memorandum of understanding with the province of Ontario as represented by the Ministry of the Attorney General. We operate the courts in the way the province requires us to. Next slide there. So we have the 2024 proposed budget, and as with the earlier presentations, you can see the 2023 budget, then actuals, the 2024 proposed budget, and then the change. There's an expected increase in the revenues from fines to the tune of about $95,000. In terms of wages and benefits, it's expected to be slightly more costly at $22,286. And expenses are expected to go up by $62,000. The notes are just below the chart there, which is the revenue increases to better reflect actuals. And so sort of through the financial modeling, there's a modest $40,000 increase to other fines. The wage and benefits increase is the 2.5% placeholder. The expense increase is offsetting parking payments to LMP increase, to LMPs, which is increased to offset above 49,000. The legal costs are increased by 2,500. I believe, is that the insurance component? Sorry, I'm looking to Jen. No, it's not. Apologies. Is that just a wages and benefits? Sorry, that's a wages and benefits item as well. The rent increase of 26,000 is a CPI 3.3% for 2024. And then the additional 4.5% for 2023. I believe at the outset of the presentations today, Jen had spoken a bit to having those numbers now for the year over year.
Yeah,
So I will look to Jen to explain that further if there's any questions.
in 2023, we had the original placeholder of 2% in there. So when we got the new CPI increase, we did not go back to this department and adjust it. So we're just adjusting the 2023 and the 2024, but it's reflective of what we are actually charging for rent. There's not like a double increase. We did increase the rent by the 6.5 last year, and subsequently this year will be the 3.3%. And that's the normal agreement, I believe, that was entered into with our once our new building was set up. So
thank you, I appreciate that. And then to finish there, the local municipality payments are decreased in the expense column to offset increases in rent and wages above. So again, that's that netting out piece, which is we only pay disbursements on the essentially the positive revenue that's at the end of the year. So in summary, over the next slide, ultimately it's minor adjustments to revenue expenses to better align with the actuals. So all of those explanations we just provided are just to reflect the actuals that we're seeing in 2023 and then what they will be in 2024 as a result. And otherwise, it's what I'm describing as sort of a status quo budget with placeholder increases to salary and wages. There's no significant asks and it's a mandated service. So that's the nature of this one. And then the recommendation is that the Provincial Pensions Administration operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of your 2024 budget.
Thank you, Nick, for that. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to Nick. So last year, maybe early this year, we had Section 3 offenses. Is that what it was called? Downloaded. Did that affect the Part 3? Yeah. Did that affect operations and do you see with the growth happening in the area over the next few years, when is that going to be a tipping point for added staffing, I guess?
Thank you for that question. It's a great one. So given our current personnel in terms of their skills and expertise, and I should say, because this will come up again in the legal services presentation, this speaks more to the prosecutor himself in terms of he's part of admin services budget. He's not in the POA budget, Jack Huber. He is a very experienced prosecutor and has the skills and expertise to take on those new files. And the reason that's important is the download was of more serious offenses. So the ones that we always did were sort of what you'd think of as routine Highway Traffic Act offenses, and the Crown attorneys and assistant Crown attorneys continued to prosecute until quite recently, the more serious ones. They've now downloaded those to us, and we've had a lot of success with that program. So our prosecutor has been able to handle that within his capacity because he's a full-time prosecutor. I am aware of other municipalities that are experiencing some significant cost challenges because of either the volume being so high of the download where they need to add more staff, or they have very quiet courts and they pay out to essentially private lawyers on a per diem. So the rates are so high that it's caused significant cost stresses. We're in the Goldilocks zone of having the right prosecutor and his capacity to take it on. And the end result of it is that we used to have a withholding amount for the Crown per diems when they would do that. So held back from the revenue that was delivered to us by the ministry would include the cost of the Crown's having performed those prosecutions. And so now we don't have that. So I wouldn't say it's a substantial amount ultimately that we were paying those per diems, but it actually reflects more revenue to the county as a result because less is being taken off. And that is atypical compared to other municipalities. More directly to your point, the staffing issue depends on personnel, and you'll hear more essentially about potential succession planning in the coming years, but that is not anticipated to occur in 2024, perhaps 2025 and beyond.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We're gonna have Counselor Sloan here. There he is. Do you have a question, Counselor? Nope, good.
No, Warden, thank you.
Yep. All right then.
Be it resolved that the Provincial Offences Administration operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Be willing to move that, Counselor Sloan?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And hopefully you'll second that, Deputy Warden? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 6-7, Director of Legal Services Planning, 2024 budget presentation.
Thank you, Warden. And sorry, just to go back to last one, I just wanted to say our court is recognized as a very high functioning and efficient court. And this sort of goes to that last question, and I meant to include it in that answer. Because other municipalities are now experiencing the Part 3 download, they're actually recommended both justice of the peace and court administrations and prosecutors to speak to Elgin County to figure out how to make it workable. And I did want to flag that just in the context of a budget presentation. It's a credit to our staff over there. They're really good at their jobs, and it's recognized within the fairly small world of court administration. So I just wanted to give credit to them because it frankly has nothing to do with me. They are just very good at their jobs, and I appreciate it.
That's very good. Are we entitled to a consultation fee?
You know what? Thus far, we have done some meetings that, for the betterment of taxpayers across Ontario, we've tried to help folks out.
Okay.
But I hear on that, if it hits a volume where it's worth addressing, certainly new and interesting creative sources of revenue are never a bad thing. So. Okay, on to planning. Sorry about that. So the planning department processes severance consents, which is through the Land Division Committee, and it also operates the committee itself. And then through the approval authority powers of the Planning Act, we also process plans of subdivision, plans of condominiums, and make recommendations and approve local official planned amendments. And then there's also from time to time the major strategic projects that we have, like the county official plan project that's currently ongoing. So why we do it, ultimately it's to provide efficient service to the community as it develops and grows. We're designated by the minister as the approval authority for severance consents, plans of subdivision and condominiums for local official plans. So that's why the authority rests with the county, just to explain that to both this committee and to the public. And the Planning Act, because we're designated to act on behalf of the minister, provides for a number of mandated operations within that are then exercised by the approval authority. So that's why we do it. But the main focus is, of course, helping efficient growth and development within the county. Over to the next slide. So this presentation is actually going to have two different scenarios or options in it. So the scenario one is the current departmental organization, which is a manager of planning services, and then the second position is a planning technician / secretary treasurer of the Land Division Committee. The second scenario is a shared service model, which is delivering county and local municipal partner planning services that would see more staff on board, which is recommended to be a director of planning, a manager of planning / senior planner. And I flagged that potential difference in title because it really depends on what the building out of the department looks like. But either way, we suggest that the years of experience we'd be looking at would likely fall on the band that the manager of planning service is currently budgeted at. So whether that title changes, it would likely still be at that level in terms of salary modeling. And then 1 or 2 junior planners, which are scaled to the volume of local municipal partner work involved. So we wouldn't have 2 unless it was actually necessary, of course. The next slide. So in terms of how we took into consideration the 2024 budget survey results, so essentially we saw folks respond by saying that, so 31.7% of respondents said it's at least somewhat important to them, and then 39.4% stating it's very important. So you get up to 70% of people responding to a budget survey acknowledging that there's an importance to planning services. The 57.1% said the investment should be maintained, and 13.4% are indicating it should be increased. And then you can see the change over the 2023 numbers through the rest of the paragraph there. In the open-ended responses, to the extent people responded directly to the issue of planning services, or more generally towards what the public's just looking for out of government generally, it's that they're looking for efficiencies and services to be found. And it's our view that the shared service proposal before council, so scenario 2 today, seeks to leverage shared service efficiencies that will increase service levels and reduce overall costs for ultimately that one ratepayer that we refer to. Next slide there. So in terms of inflationary pressures, so again, planning and development is largely driven by the folks doing the services. It's not a materials-based department. And so where consultants are utilized, there's an expected inflationary increase of 6%. And essentially the external consultant we currently use rates are going up by $10 an hour next year, is where that 6% comes from. Although it was stable for the period of time that we've currently had that external consultant. There's no increase, because I thought this was important to note to this committee. There's no proposed increase in the planning fees at this time, which would have the effect of increasing revenues and offset those inflationary pressures. And the reason that's not being proposed right now is to support investment and development in our community. Under the Planning Act, you're entitled to set your fees to essentially have cost recovery. So you could do a study and look at whether or not they need increase. We're not recommending that at the moment because we're essentially trying to generate growth in our communities. The next one, how does it relate to our corporate priorities? So the SDR encourages a shared service coordinated delivery of planning services for the county and its LMPs. So certainly scenario 2 is focused around that strategic delivery recommendation. In terms of council's strategic plan, the department aligns operationally with all of the strategic priorities that you see under the 2 major headings of growing Elgin and investing in Elgin. And then in terms of other corporate documents, the draft county official plan anticipates an increasing rate of growth across the county and its LMPs, particularly in Central Elgin and Southwold. And the shared services proposal will likely improve recruitment and retention of professional staff expertise, which has been a challenge across the county. So we mean that both in our own department as well as through our local municipal partners. Over the next one. Thank you. So this is scenario 1. So this is maintaining essentially the current staffing model that's in our budget and has been for a few years now. And so there's a wage and benefit increase that has that inflationary placeholder of 2.5%, which would result in $9,800. And then the expenses actually went down because there was a one-time 2023 expense of implementing Cloud Permit, which is a permitting system that you see well, lots. I was about to say all municipalities use now, but I'm not sure that's true. You do see quite a few of them switching to it, and it's certainly an efficient system once it's implemented and up and running. So that was a one-time expense that's going away. So you actually see a decrease in the expenses year over year. So the net operating is actually a decrease of 20,159 under this sort of status quo model or scenario. Go to the next one. So scenario 2, which is the one that anticipates staffing levels for a shared services model, has a new director of planning position in it, and finance was able to calculate. So based on our existing bands for a director level and then accounting for those benefits and other add-ons to the salary, the all-in cost is 189,000. And again, you see that same expense decrease of 30,000. So that the net increase to the department, if we go with more of a shared services model, is $168,759. And that it does not, because we haven't gotten that far in any of our discussions at the county, that does not account for sort of any revenues on a fee for service shared services. This would just be sort of a levy model where this is just the cost to the county. It hasn't anticipated how, if there was a decision to have a revenue stream, that looks. And if there is no revenue stream, then presumably there is a savings at a local level if over time they start to use county planners and don't have their own on staff. So again, with the focus on that one ratepayer who's ultimately paying their property taxes, we anticipate savings to them. So going to the next one. So the budget summary is the two scenarios certainly require further evaluation and input from the LMPs to determine the optimal structure of a shared service model and demonstrate cost-effective service delivery. I may, at the end of this, pass the presentation off to Mr. Shropshire. There's certainly been discussions at the CAO's meetings, and I'm going to let him exercise his discretion on how much should be shared sort of at this committee meeting about that, because we have sort of a broad understanding of what the LMPs might need, but we don't have detailed figures is how I'll put it, and I'll leave it for Mr. Shropshire from there. And then just to manage expectations, the development and evaluation of the current and proposed model will occur in a phased approach through 2024 in consultation with the LMPs. And what we mean by that is even if scenario 2 is pursued, there's still an iterative process of making that transition to the department. So as much as we're budgeting as though it would exist for the entire year, obviously on January 1, there is not going to be a director of planning, right? We will still have our external provider. So as we move towards that model, we would essentially be providing live variance updates on what that's looking like and what we project out through the year. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Shropshire at this point.
Thank you, Nick. We have gone out to each of the CEOs in the local municipalities and asked for their expectations for planning services in the next year. And I'll just say that they're varied. We have some people that have indicated that they're in immediate need of planning services as quickly as possible. Their current planning services, in one case, someone is interested in retiring. So there's obviously going to have to be a handover. We have other communities that have fairly robust planning services. There's no immediate need or interest for them to change. In one case, they have a shared planning service with St. Thomas. And in another case, they have hired independent planners, or sorry, beg your pardon, hired planners that work for the local community. So there is not an expectation that we're going to move everybody over all at once and there's a must move scenario. This will be done based on what makes sense for each of the local municipalities. But we have started to gather information and also talk to the CEOs directly about saying this is not a model that would be up and running by January the 1st. It would be something that would be iterative. We've got our onboarding of the new CAO coming up in January. I would expect Mr. Parkins would be in a position where he'd want to be hiring the new director and so on. So it's going to take a few months to get up and running. But I think the key piece is what we're wanting to build and recommend to council is a model that would be consistent with what the local municipalities desire for service delivery. And there is still going to be an expectation that 2024 would be a transition year. And there would still be a requirement for them to have some funds available in their budget to maintain their planning services until we're in a position to take those on. Happy to entertain any questions, but a work in progress, I think is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, we're at that point for discussion. Does any member of the committee have any questions for Counselor Sloan?
Hi there. Thanks, Warden. Through you to Nick. I have a question about the planning charges. You said that you made a decision that they wouldn't be increased. We talk about how there's inflation and I don't know what the comparators are with other jurisdictions. Can you give me an idea of what the cost is for our planning charges, what they bring in and what consideration, if there is any, to what comparative jurisdictions charge for the same processes, please?
So thank you for that question, and I think I'll have to take it away and get back to you with an answer unless Ms. Ford has an answer. And I just want to be clear, we haven't made a decision to not increase them. What I was trying to describe is that we as staff are not recommending or proposing an increase in there that would be reflected in those numbers. So it's certainly open to council to direct staff to undertake the kind of analysis you're talking about in a really comprehensive way. But I acknowledge you're looking for ballpark figures, and unfortunately, I don't know the totality of the fees right now. I know what some of the individual fees are. Like by way of example, I know stamping a deed at the LDC costs $300. Severances, I believe, are $1,200. Initial application fees of subdivision approvals are several thousand. But the totality in terms of the overall revenue, I don't have an answer for you unless Ms. Ford has them right on hand. She's shaking her head. And so I will take that away and I can certainly get you an answer. But thank you for that question though.
Thank you.
Deputy Warden?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I guess when it comes to planning, I think it's been indicated that we do need a senior planner in-house. I think we can't go on with a consultant forever. Southfield, we're in that same spot where we had an in-house planner. That person's gone now. Now we're back to a consultant again. And it's expensive. It's and this person we're getting a really good deal from compared to other consultants. It's still expensive, and it's the difficulty is maintaining or hanging on to that planner once you get them. And I think the county plan to put junior planners in, I think, is probably our best bet for continuity for longer periods of time, because continuity right now is not something we're able to manage. I think we've gone through 4 planners in 4 years, something like that at Southfield. So.
Well, I agree with your comments, Deputy Warden, that's true. We currently do use a consulting planner, and it is expensive. And I think the most efficient use would be for a shared servicing arrangement with centralized planning. Personally, I think that we'll still end up with coordinators or clerks in our separate municipalities, but to have a centralized service where we can have some cost efficiencies, I think is the way to go. Intuitively, that makes sense to me. Now, getting back to staff in your budget here, I can't help but think that the revenue side is still a little undervalued. Particularly with the growth that is expected coming. And I realize that you don't want to go way out on a limb and with an unrealistic expectation. But I thank you, Nick, for providing the number of for what it costs for a consent application. You said $1,200. I was thinking it was closer to $2,000, but maybe it is. We could go back to our rates and fees bylaw, and I believe that came out in July, and we could figure that one out shortly. But
You now have me second guessing myself. I will pull it up live.
okay, please, because it gets back to what Councillor Sloan was getting at. Are we current with our neighbors for what our fee structure is? And I don't think we want to be uncompetitive, but I don't think we want to lag too far behind.
And to be clear, I think Mr. Loeb spoke to this, but the fee structure is really something a council has to approve or not approve. I mean, that really is completely within council's purview. So we'll be happy to take direction, but whatever fees are charged from both our local municipalities or at the county level, we'll make sure that that's compiled and provided to the budget committee and council as a whole for your consideration before you have to deal with the budget.
Jen, please.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Counselor Sloan's question, the actual budget between the two departments, planning and land division, is $150,000 revenue. And at this time, so by the end of October, we're trending at about 138,000 in fees coming in. So we are on target, so it's not outlandishly undervalued or overvalued, but if it's certainly within council's right to increase those fees if you so feel that it would be needed, or maybe we can increase it if there's expected growth on that one, but there was no change in this presentation.
All right, my apologies, because when I looked at the original the planning model here, we talked about a current department, including a planning technician, secretary, treasurer of the LDC. So not recognizing that you had a separate budget for land division. I'll retract that. Okay. But still, I'd like to know what the fees are.
And I have that for you. So the 2023 fees and charges bylaw, 23-33 has the application for consent at $1,250.
Okay.
There's other fees as you go through it, but that's the initial application fee.
Yeah, all right. And you said subdivisions are 7,000.
So I had said several thousand in
Oh,
an effort,
several.
to hedge, and I have it
Ah.
up now and it is 4,000. So
Several, that
you
means
know,
more than one, right?
yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, thank you for that. Okay. Okay, any additional questions then for the planning budget? Okay, seeing none then. Jenna, please.
Sorry, just one question. Is there a preferred scenario that we're voting on?
I think it's entirely up to council, but I'm from the budget committee's perspective, I know I'm in favor of going with scenario 2, but we're not there yet.
Personally, I would be in favor of 2 as well. I'm
Yeah.
not sure about Counselor Hance or Counselor Sloan.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Counselor Sloan? Looking for centralized planning or looking to go with the way we are?
Centralized ultimately is I think the best goal, but it's on a budget when we're a month out from starting.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Warden, that it might have to be a combined or a hybrid. So I appreciate it. Would be nice to have centralized.
I didn't catch that, did you? Well. Okay, well, it'll be up to you, Deputy Warden, and Counselor Sloan, how you would like to present that as a scenario 2 or scenario 1? Deputy Warden.
I would propose scenario 2 for now, and
Yeah.
we can have more fulsome discussion with county council at that point.
Jen?
Would it be an option for, if the committee would like, we could certainly bring forward another option as opposed to starting it immediately in January? We could look at starting it in March or June. It would be after budget has been struck then.
I think that's probably more in line with what's gonna happen. I think it'll be about a mid-year. Yeah. How does that suit with you, Counselor Sloan?
Very good.
Okay.
A hybrid, I think that's perfect. Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. And Jen is rewriting her resolution.
Okay.
June 1st would be sufficient, Counselor Sloan? I'm assuming.
I'm seeing it now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Be it resolved that the planning operating budget as presented in scenario 2 revised to begin June 1st, 2024 be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay, who's interested in moving that? Counselor Deputy Warden Jones? Hopefully, perfect. Thank you, Counselor Sloan. All in favor? Carried. We'll just keep trading back and forth. Director of Legal Services, Land Division. Now we'll get into the meat of the matter.
Thank you, Warden. So we're taking the hamburger approach where we did a straightforward one, then a more complicated one, and now we're back to a straightforward one. So the Land Division Committee is a committee of council that's authorized by the Planning Act as the statutory authority, and then council established it as by bylaw many years ago. And the Land Division Committee essentially processes the subdivision of land by severance consent. So that's anywhere from 1 new property to 4 new properties. If you get to 5 and up, you're a subdivision. And so the LDC has 1 assigned staff member, and that's the secretary treasurer of the LDC. It / planning technician is his official title. So why it is done is the Land Division Committee works with community stakeholders to ensure that land is subdivided in an orderly and well-planned manner across the county. There's a lot of provincial policies and official plan policies related to severance consents, particularly in rural areas. So you want to make sure they're done properly. Why it's done through a Land Division Committee, looking at the initial reports of why it was set up, is that's just a more efficient process than requiring it to go through the council cycle. Additionally, the Land Division Committee is composed of members from across the county in a way that aligns with the local municipal partners. So you do get that full county view of things when the committee meets. And so what they're doing when they meet is reviewing applications for severance consents. And it provides sort of that streamlined, cost-effective process rather than subdivision. So you also don't have to do it this way. You could make everybody go through a full subdivision process, but of course, we're trying to be as efficient as possible for our ratepayers. So again, how did the department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? This is essentially the same information that was in the planning one, so I'm not going to read through it again. The answers about planning services incorporated both elements of planning and land division committee. So we can just move to the next one. So there is a modest increase for purchase services for legal fees and printed materials in terms of inflationary pressures. And then there's the 2.5% placeholder for wages and benefits. In terms of legal fees, there is a certain amount of real estate work that the Land Division Committee requires where there's issues related to title of the property and deed stamping. That is not the core expertise of our legal department. So we utilize external legal from time to time on it to review real estate matters directly. So that in terms of legal fees, that's what that means there. It's not providing advice to the committee. I will go do that when they need advice, although I don't attend every meeting. I just go as needed. And then the printed materials are the signs for the purposes of notice. So when there's severance applications, you have to put signs up. So that's what those are. In the next slide. So the service delivery review, the Land Division Committee is part of coordinated planning services that serve the entire county. So this is essentially, there is a model where you could return all of this pursuant to the Planning Act to the locals to deal with themselves. But this is of course an efficient consolidated service to do it under one roof. In terms of the strategic plan, the Land Division Committee aligns with all 3 strategic priority areas of serving Elgin, growing Elgin, and investing Elgin. So each of the sub-strategies are all of those sub-strategies orient around the Land Division Committee. Other corporate documents, and again, so you have the county and local official plans. So this budget also interacts with the planning and development budget we just saw, which is why we did it first. And then the local official plans and county official plan obviously guide the work of the LDC. Next one. The 2024 proposed budget here. So here you see the more significant revenue because we have a lot of severance applications. And then the wages and benefits, you can see that there's a proposed budget increase next year of 6,358, and that's the wage adjustment placeholder. The lease is adjusted by 3.3% CPI, and I would again refer to Ms. Ford's earlier comment about how that CPI and rent works with regard to the POA. I assume it's roughly the same explanation, but otherwise I'll have to pass it back to Ms. Ford. And then the capital decreased slightly because the committee itself, the members of the committee get mobile devices, iPads, just every term of council. So those were purchased last year, or sorry, this year, 2023, because it was the first term, year of the term, but then they don't need purchase again until 2027. So that's the overview of the actual Land Division budget. Next slide there.
Don, please.
Oh,
On that slide, there was some specific feedback from members of the Land Division Committee about their ability to go and do inspections when there was a particularly complex issue before the Land Committee. I think our current budget process doesn't explicitly talk about mileage reimbursements or whatever. I would like just to raise that with the Budget Committee, and I'd like to work with Nick and Jennifer to ensure that it's clearly articulated that there is provisions in our budget. If we find out that there's not provisions that are sufficient, then it's a different question for us. But I believe that the language has been captured under a number of staff hours or something for investigation. And the concerns that were raised was that they want to be able to go out and get paid for mileage for their inspections. I think that was the nature of it. But because it's come up in the last couple of weeks and it's been more than one member of the Land Division Committee, I'd just like that to be reflected in our budget deliberations. I think Jennifer might have something to share.
Thank you for that, Don. Jen?
Thanks.
Yes, through you, Mr. Warden. We do have a provision in there already. It's always been there for units of investigation. And the units of investigation are set at 84 units per year. And that includes 7 hours per unit. So there is provision there for them to be able to go out, do investigations. Whether or not they've been using that, they have to submit that on their timesheet, I believe, in order to be paid for it. So there's like a meeting piece plus a provision for investigation, and that's to cover mileage, cover time. So that's all inclusive of their investigation on whatever particular item they need to go out and review.
So it's a compensation package over and above just straight mileage expense.
They would get it in lieu of mileage, so they would just get a unit of investigation, which is like 7 hours, which would cover.
Yeah, that's the piece that we have to have. So as Jennifer's pointed out, it's in the budget. It's always been in the budget, but because it's not explicit, there's been some confusion. There also, I think, needs to be some clarity around, are people actually getting paid to go out, or is that part of their regular stipend for serving on the Land Division Committee? Or is there an expectation that there's more money? What I've heard back from the members of the committee is they never thought they were going to get paid more than what they're doing for attending a meetings, but they do want to get paid for their direct expenses for doing the investigation, like the mileage. So I think Jennifer's provided the explanation. I don't think we have to make an adjustment to the amount, but there is some clarity they're looking for.
Through you, Mr. Warden, and certainly if they wish to just be paid for their mileage and not their time, we can certainly pay them mileage. This amount would offset that. So they may be over on their mileage line, but under on their wages line. So we certainly can accommodate with that within the budget. The overall, understanding was originally when this particular department was set up that it was to be revenue neutral to the county. So we can work within those budget line items to make that work for them as per their wishes.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. Any additional questions? Yes, please, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Warden. Just a comment. I know sometimes when we see stuff come through the township office for application for severance, whatever, the maps that we get aren't required to be a surveyed map. They're just a hand-drawn sketch. And I think a lot of the complications come around that hand-drawn sketch. It can lead to difficulties because I'm not saying anybody's being dishonest, but some sketches have a lot not to be desired about because they're not anywhere close to being accurate.
Hmm.
And I think possibly that's part of the problem here is we don't require that surveyed until after land division. And I don't think you can get around it, but some of the sketches are pretty sketchy.
It's a good way to put it, but yeah, I agree with you. The other side of it is, if it's a GIS or a swoop photography, it doesn't capture the rolling nature of the property either, and so it's difficult. And so the argument has been put on to me that, to have actually eyes on, not necessarily sitting in the driveway, just drive by, have eyes on, kind of gives a better perspective. And I don't think there's an expectation that, you would have members from West Elgin visiting Malahide or Bayham. But the Bayham rep doing Bayham, Malahide doing Malahide, and that kind of thing, to give that kind of detail back to, or feedback to, the Land Division Committee. Did you have something to offer, Nick?
No, because it sort of gets away from the budget piece. At some point, I'd be pleased to sort of address council about the different processes and why there's merits and drawbacks to when you get a survey drawn by an OLS.
Mhm.
At front ending and at the beginning, and I do recognize the deputy mayor said there may not be a way to get around it. It theoretically can be required, but then you're putting a big upfront expense on people before they kind of know where they're going with it. And so anyway, that's sort of aside from the budget. So I'd be happy to bring a report to council at some other date.
Okay. Counselor Sloan, do you have any questions regarding Land Division?
No, sir.
Thank you. I think we're pretty good on that then. Please.
Be it resolved that the Land Division operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay, mover and seconder, I believe, I think it's Counselor Sloan's turn. And Deputy Warden Jones is the second. All in favor? Yep, that's carried. Thank you. 6-9, Director of Legal Services and Manager of Administrative Services, Deputy Clerk. Oh, you got them both together. Administrative Services 2024 budget presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to members of the committee. Mr. Loeb and I are here to present the administrative services budget, and included in this presentation will also be the council, warden, and agriculture budgets. So who we are, administrative services is comprised of multiple divisions, including council and warden, administrative and legislative services, corporate communications, and legal services. Our primary duties are to support and research for council activities, and we prepare bylaws, minutes, agendas, and reports for council and its committees. Our department also provides strategic communications by informing and engaging residents on civic and council projects and initiatives. Legal services provides legal advice to all county departments and Elgin's local municipal partners. And why we do it, our department functions include many mandatory and essential services for elected officials, and we carry out the statutory duties of the clerk. And I'll turn it to Nick.
If it's okay with you, Warden, Jen and I are going to sort of pass it back and forth. I
Yes,
can only imagine it's like watching a well-coordinated ballet, but
we'll try to keep up. We'll try to keep up with you.
So, this is my budget rendition of Swan Lake. Like to make budget exciting. Just to sort of flesh out legal services. So we're modeled after a shared services department. Around delivering shared services to our local municipal partners. So the legal services department was established in 2016 with the former county solicitor, Mr. Gibson. And it's expanded over time because when he came here, it was just service delivery to Elgin. It became apparent over his first few years here that there is more work just for Elgin than one lawyer can do in the number of hours per year. And so then it became sort of a matter of efficiency of how do you model a department that has sufficient lawyers for the county of Elgin if you also don't necessarily, although we continued to collect data, need 2 full-time lawyers for that service delivery. And of course, the obvious answer and the efficiencies that we found are through delivering services to the local municipal partners. We do that in part because of the highly regulated way that lawyers operate on a more traditional retainer basis. So we're actually retained by the local municipal partners to act as their lawyers. Our office is registered with the Law Society. We have insurance for it, and it's solicitor client privilege work that we do for them. And ultimately that results, as we'll see in a couple slides, to revenue to the county to offset some of the costs of the legal services department. So that's who we are, and we provide sort of everything within our expertise to all of those client departments and client local municipal partners. And then why we do it is for efficient service delivery. So this is the kind of work I love, and that's why my colleague Andrew does it as well. But in terms of why this model is, it's highly efficient for both the county itself and the local municipal partners. Every entity has a certain amount of legal work they need done, and this is the most cost-effective way of doing it.
So how did your department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? Approximately 12% of the county's total budget supports government services administration, county council and committees. 42.2% of survey respondents felt that an appropriate amount is spent on these services, whereas 30.7% indicated that too much is spent on these services. 19.7% need to know more, and 7.3% of respondents felt that too little is spent on these services. When preparing our departmental budgets for council, warden, administrative services / legal services, and agriculture, we have taken these budget survey results into consideration as much as possible. So the proposed budgets for 2024 for council and warden essentially maintain a current funding levels with only a 2.5% placeholder included for wages and benefits. The proposed 2024 budget for administrative services indicates an overall decrease of $105,161. And legal services provides an efficiency for the county in providing cost-effective shared services to our local municipal partners. Next slide. How did your department take into consideration inflationary pressures in your department? For the council and warden budgets, we've included a wage adjustment placeholder of 2.5% and otherwise are maintaining a status quo budget for 2024 for each. In administrative services, the department sees an overall decrease resulting from the retirement of the county solicitor. Additionally, legal services expects an increase in revenue of approximately $9,200. Next slide. How are your departmental priorities linked back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate departmental plans? In terms of the service delivery review, administrative services and legal services have improved our manual processes through the introduction of agenda management software, which was a 2022 budget ask, as well as through the implementation of legal software for practice management, time tracking, and invoicing. In terms of council's strategic plan, our department objectives closely align with serving Elgin through for example, through corporate communications. We look for ways to engage with the community and various stakeholders. And we also aim to explore different ways of addressing community need. So in terms of legal services, we work with our local municipal partners to look for ways to establish shared services.
And I'll just sort of add one detail to the point that's under the service delivery review there. So late this year, we've implemented new practice management software in the legal department, and we've sort of moved over to a more digital office from the paper-based office it was before. And what we're looking to in 2024, we don't need a lot of money. The software is relatively cost effective, is being able to establish data to find those further efficiencies. So in terms of the service delivery review model, there's just the fact that it's a shared service ends up in an efficiency, but we're also going to start being able to produce reports on how we spend our time and what kind and type of files are sort of the best use of our time to have better metrics going forward. So in terms of trying to find those efficiencies through modernizing the organization, that's one of the things we're looking to in legal in 2024.
Next slide. So first we will cover the council 2024 proposed budget. So the 2024 proposed budget for council expects an increase of $6,501 over 2023, which is due to the wage adjustment 2.5% placeholder that's been included. Otherwise, there are no new asks for 2024. For Warden 2024 proposed budget, similar to the council budget, the only increase expected is due to the 2.5% wage adjustment, which amounts to approximately $2,219. Next. I think you were covering this.
So for the administrative services budget, you can see an expected increase in legal revenue. I should also just note, because I know that this was pulled on November 7th, and you can see the actuals appear low for 11 or 10 completed months through the year. For 2023, we've billed a bunch of legal bills since this slide was put together. So the actuals are, and I'm not in finance, so I have some latitude on target for 2023. And the one thing I just mentioned about revenue is legal revenue is more of a rolling average, I'd describe it as, than a specific target we can seek to meet. How much local work we do in any given year at a high volume largely depends on how much litigation type of work, because that's the most resource intensive in terms of hours we spend. And then beyond that, I do just want to flag, because it's a discussion that comes up from time to time, we don't set revenue targets for our department in the same way that a private practice firm does, because it leads to incentivizing doing local work over the county work. So we don't seek to hit a certain level of revenue. That said, we have a pretty clear idea that between the POA revenue, which also appears here in terms of Mr. Huber's time prosecuting, that's billed back, as well as our municipal work that we do through Andrew and I, that, around $400,000 is right. So I just wanted to explain that for both the public and for this committee, just in terms of what that revenue looks like and how we sort of think of it in our department. And the other thing I can speak to directly is the expense increase of $10,500 for insurance for lawyers. It deals with our work that we do for the local municipal partners, not the insurance portfolio that we have when we do county work. I had hoped to have an exact figure by the time that we were at this budget meeting, because that's an estimate that's in there. And thus far, I'm actually still working through it. There's a few different things that may not be that expensive, but I asked Ms. Ford to put a placeholder in of as expensive as I would guess it is. So that's what's in there right now. And so that's why that expense is there. And then I can't speak too much to the other expense lines because there's quite a few of them in there because it's the office of the CAO. So if you have any direct questions about what other expense increase we might expect next year, those would be better directed essentially to finance, who has a better understanding of what's underneath there. So those are my comments on the admin services budget there. And of course, you can see the decrease is expected because this year we had an unusual event where, because of succession planning, we had more lawyers this year as the former county solicitor was retiring essentially. And so next year we aren't anticipating replacing him and having 4 lawyers. So I'm including the prosecutor. So right now we have myself and Andrew and Jack. We aren't anticipating looking to adding any personnel, or at least not until we gather enough data to see what that business case looks like through that new management software I was talking about.
Okay, before we carry on, Nick, just want to clarify. So the added expense of the $10,000 is insurance to cover off practice for the local municipal partners. And your revenue stream has an expectation to gain you an extra 10,000 or just under 9,000. I'm asking, is it worth doing? It is for the local municipal partner, but is it worth doing for the county?
Yes, so it relates to all they were, sorry, it isn't only related. The increased insurance expense is not the premise of the increased legal revenues.
Right.
The increased insurance it essentially is to cover an adequate amount of insurance for doing the local municipal work overall, which is reflected in about half of that $400,000, so about $200,000 worth of the revenue.
All right, thank you. Okay, is there any other questions on the admin services at the moment? Okay. Okay, let's move on with that. Where are we? Agriculture?
For agriculture. I think Nick was going to speak to this one.
My apologies, I just accidentally closed my slide. So the agricultural piece, I just thought I would explain. So this is solely an expense that is directed towards the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. So this is a contracted service we have with them, and the efficiency of the service is the tree commissioner slash weed inspector does a variety of duties that are under the Conservation Authority, and they are his home employer. And then we contract the service for the portion of the work that is the county work related to our tree bylaw. And so essentially two public entities are able to find an efficiency in providing a consolidated service there. And the other point I just make is because this is by way of contract, I'm not suggesting the budget committee has any interest in, well, what if we didn't do this? But if that question comes up, I would have to come back with a later report about what the contract provisions are and what that exit looks like. Because of course we are bound to certain contractual provisions related to it. So again, I'm not suggesting anyone wishes to do that. I just thought I'd explain that in advance in terms of explaining why it's just an expense line essentially. Oh, and sorry, if it's helpful, it results in essentially enforcement of the tree bylaw, which then sometime later does from time to time result in convictions with significant fines. But those are reflected elsewhere in a different budget, not this budget.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions on the agriculture side? Yeah, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Warden. Just a comment. Mr. Lawrence is a jack of all trades, and he's a very busy boy when he's not inspecting weeds or trees. But I think both of those applications that we use are very essential to life in rural Ontario and Elgin County.
I think so too. Okay. We come to the summary.
Okay. So to summarize, the changes from 2023 to 2024 reflect wage and benefit costs for personnel inclusive of a placeholder of 2.5% non-union increase. Also, the legal services succession planning is complete, leading to a decrease in staff complement of 1 lawyer year over year. And lastly, the warden and council budgets remain a status quo, subject to only to the 2.5% inflationary increase as a placeholder. At this point, we'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Jenna and Nick. Any questions? Yeah. Deputy Warden. Oh, you're putting hand up to move it? Well, there we go. And Andrew's going to second it in a minute.
Yes, sir.
She's right there. She's concussed, but she's right here. I'm sorry, excuse me, your turn.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Administrative Services Council, Warden, and Agriculture operating budgets as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay, and I believe it was Deputy Warden's turn, and hopefully Councillor Sloan's willing to second that. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And there we go, it's carried. Now we'll move on to 6:10. We can still take a break if you want, Don. Manager of Economic Development, Tourism, Strategic Initiatives, Economic Development and Tourism 2024 Budget Presentation. Good afternoon, Carolyn. It's not red anymore.
It's looking better. Good afternoon. So thank you very much. So the Economic Development and Tourism Department is dedicated to supporting the growth of existing businesses and attracting new businesses to the region. And on the tourism side, we focus on promoting the region's tourism assets. And we do this to make Elgin County a great place to live, work, and play. And so we did take a look at the results from the 2024 budget survey. And in this survey, we learned that the majority of residents would like to maintain funding, and this was a more popular option than it has been in previous years, indicating there's perhaps a greater focus on economic development than there has been in the past. And some of the general comments on the survey indicated that residents would like us to encourage industry with a focus on jobs and education, and also reorient the budget towards aggressive and effective efforts with when we have major economic benefits within our reach. So again, this feedback aligns with our department's focus on business retention and attraction, and as well as our development and implementation of a business attraction strategy. Next slide. So we did several things to take inflation into consideration. The first one was the elimination of tourism membership fees. So our tourism partners typically pay a fee each year to be included in our visitors guide, and also for us to promote them through our social media and website. So this year we're proposing to eliminate those fees to remove that burden from the tourism operators so that we can promote all of our businesses, not just the ones that pay the fees. And so that this is one way that we can support our local business community. And another thing that we are doing, we're leveraging existing grant programs. So this year we did receive 2 grants, and we're continuing to do that in 2024. We just submitted a grant to FedDev to help us develop and implement that attraction strategy that went to council several weeks ago. And then another way that we took inflation into consideration was the focus on supporting business growth. So when our businesses grow, that increases tax revenue for the municipalities, and this will help relieve some of those pressures that are brought on by inflation. Next slide, please. And the work that our department does aligns with our strategy. So if we take a look at our service delivery review, this review identified a closer partnership with the City of St. Thomas as one area of opportunity, and we continue to support the Elgin St. Thomas Small Business Enterprise Center, and we work on various initiatives together throughout the year. They support our small business community through different grants and programs, and also business counseling. And one initiative that was recently brought to council was the Young Entrepreneurs Initiative. So this is a program whereby young entrepreneurs will be mentored and supported throughout the starting of their business. So we will continue to look for partnerships like this throughout the coming year. And council strategic plan, our focus on business attraction, retention, and expansion aligns with council's priority to see growth or foster growth in commercial, industrial, residential areas in Elgin. And then last year, council also endorsed an economic development strategy, and this strategy focused on leveraging existing partnerships to support our business community. And we are doing this by working closely with our local municipal partners with our investment attraction strategy. This is something that is very important, that we work with our local municipal partners to make sure our activities align with their priorities as well. And we're also working in partnership with the Small Business Enterprise Center, as was previously mentioned, and the Elgin Business Resource Center. Again, a few weeks ago, we brought to council the pitch that we are sponsoring to support businesses as well. And that's just a few examples of some partnerships. Western Ontario Wardens would be another. They're working on a workforce attraction strategy, and we are looking to leverage that partnership as well. Next slide. So you will see a budget decrease here, mainly due to the portion of the general manager wages and benefits being returned to the engineering department. So that's the main change here. There are no new asks in this budget. It does have the wage increase by 2.5%. Another decrease is also the $50,000 that went towards our website redevelopment, and SCORE membership was removed from this budget, but will be considered by council when all the other council memberships are considered as well. So again, this is mainly a status quo budget, but I would like to highlight several of the department's priorities for 2024. So we're going back to the basics. We want to focus on attracting, retaining, and expanding businesses and promoting our tourism operators. And to do this, one of the things that we would like to do is take a look at our ELG incentives program. This is one of the programs that we have that supports our business community to make improvements to their properties. Currently, we're focusing on improving facades, their buildings, and some signage. So what we would like to do is take a look at this community improvement plan to see if these priorities are still relevant or if there are other areas that we should be focusing on. So we propose to do this either in partnership with Paul Hicks through Republic Urbanism, or if we have a director of planning in place. So that is one of the activities that we will be undertaking to support our business community and also to attract new business to Elgin. And the other two priorities for the next year is planning for the growth that is anticipated to happen in this region. And part of this is our investment attraction strategy, which I've presented to council previously, and also helping local businesses. So this is our business retention and expansion program that we launched this month. And we have been meeting with many local businesses, learning a lot about how we can better support them. And we anticipate that the interviews with our business community will be wrapped up towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, and we will be developing an action plan and taking their feedback into consideration when we think about the programming that we should be offering in 2024. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carolyn. Does anyone have any questions for Carolyn on this particular budget? I don't hear any. I got to commend you for bringing this forward. Yes, you're doing a lot for the same dollars. You know what I'm getting at? And so keep at it. Doing a good job. Okay. All right.
Be it resolved that the Economic Development and Tourism operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Thank you. And I believe it is Councillor Sloan's turn to move.
Happy to do so.
Sec-
Warden.
And Deputy Warden Jones will second. All in favor? I guess it's carried. I didn't see his hand go up. There we go. Sorry. Sorry about that. Thank you again, Carolyn. This may be the hardest one to deal with. It's Chief Administrative Officer. Looks like it's ambulance services. Sir.
Thank you very much. Our ambulance services are contracted services for any of those people watching, as Medivy provides those services. And the Emergency Management Department supports the day-to-day operations of the department, but they are largely a standalone contracted service. If there are additional supports that they require, they do work through either the CAO's office or Andrea's office. Say the devil's name as she appears at the door, so that's perfect timing.
Absolutely.
But for the most part, they are standalone. I think it's also important to note that the EMS services are provided both to Elgin County and also the city of St. Thomas, and we have a shared service model that's basically the costs are distributed based on population. And our service provider, Medivy, is been with us for several years now. We're currently in the process of renegotiating the contract for Medivy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on some future slides. But we are required as a county to provide an EMS service, and that's a responsibility that we have from the province. In terms of our feedback from the public, ambulance services in general is seen as a very valuable service. It was either identified as the most important or very important by our survey respondents. So well over 80% are looking at this as a very valuable service. And I think that's becoming more valuable as we see the changing demographics in the county, where we have an aging population. So people definitely value their healthcare. And that's also reflected in the proportion of the residents that think we should either maintain or increase the amount of funding for EMS services. Having over a third of the respondents say that they could see is actually investing more I think is an indication of the value they place on the service and also the quality of service that we're delivering to our residents. So I think that's a very positive statement. In terms of our ability to take inflationary pressures, when you have a contract, you're trying to find a methodology of determining what's going to be fair for both parts of the contract. And over the course of the last couple of months, as we've been sitting down to renegotiate or extend our contract, there was a proposal made by our treasurer to use the annual Stats Canada October over October CPI index measure of inflation as a measurement that we could actually include as part of our budget deliberations. And that was deemed to be fair to all parties considered, and that's what we'll be using on a go-forward basis. So that's what's baked into the budget presentation that we have. Budget reductions have been made to a number of areas where we have not spent all the money in past years, or where there's been an opportunity for some additional savings, and I'll go through that in a future slide. But we have tried to take into account that although the vast majority of costs related to ambulance services relate to our staff wages, and there are some inflationary pressures there, wherever possible, we've tried to squeeze the budget to try and reduce those cost increases. Next slide, please. In terms of this service delivery review, I actually did not see any information where they were specifically focusing on ambulance services. So some of these comments are more general in nature. There certainly was an incentive or encouragement within the service delivery review to try and look for efficiencies. And the fact that we're delivering the Medavie ambulance service in cooperation with the city of St. Thomas, or we're working to deliver that one service, definitely offers some synergies and some economies of scale. Similarly, we do the same thing with our social services, but I think there's some recognition that that's a better deal for our taxpayers, and we've certainly taken advantage of that and continue to do so in the future. Council strategic plan. I think, Medavie, it dovetails fairly closely. We're wanting to make sure that our growth and development plans are keeping pace with how we deliver our services. The two budgets about the documentation and our development plans reflect that. Medavie has agreed as part of our 2024 budget to work with the county staff and the city staff to look at the development and growth of our community so that our investments in EMS services can keep pace with that. So we're looking at a minimum of 5 years, but more like a 10-year projection of what we're expecting for growth, so that we can start developing longer term strategies for EMS services. And very happy to report that Medavie was completely in step with our plans in that area as well. We were both looking for the same thing. There were a few changes in budget. I'll get to those in a moment, but there is $114,000 change. The biggest adjustment in budget is Medavie presented a request for 2 additional management staff. They are extraordinarily thin with management. I mean, basically we have 1 general manager and there's a couple of supervisors, but they were looking for an addition of 2 management staff that would be in a position to do a variety of documentation that they've identified as essential. They've had reviews from the provincial government come in and take a look at their quality of service and the way they deliver services. And the quality of care that they provide to our citizens, residents, was deemed to be very, very high. But where they saw that there was a need for some additional support was in some of the management functions, making sure that some of the paperwork was completed, making sure that some of the essential training was also supported. So after we heard that, we thought they'd made a strong case for warranting the additional 2 management people. And that's what we're recommending to County Council. And happy to report that the additional costs are being offset by a number of reductions in salary. So there's our $4.91 million piece. We also have, in all of the cases, identified that we have a 2.5% provision for wages. I'll share with you that that's what we're sort of currently having as a placeholder. Medivy is currently negotiating contracts. There might be some adjustments that will have to be considered, but the 2.5 is we're using across the board for an adjustment for wages. And that's been reflected here as well. Next slide, please. So the revenue provisions, we have those because we're splitting out. There is the provincial government. It's a rather complicated formula, but at the end of the day, they year over year, they pay approximately 50% of the cost of our ambulance service. But the complexity is that they delay that by 1 year. So we're always sort of playing a bit of a catch up, but year over year, it's approximately 50%. Whatever the portion is of the local communities portion, that's split proportionately with the city of St. Thomas based on our population. And that seems to be the fairest way we can do it. I've talked about the placeholder, the 2.5%. That represents approximately $4,300. And the other operational expenses, I beg your pardon, I've spoken about those a moment ago, there is pardon me, my slide just jumped ahead there. You can see the cost of the 2 additional supervisors that's being reflected, approximately $323,000. And there was also provisions in previous discussions about the requirement to increase an extra 12-hour shift that would serve primarily BAM. But when we say BAM, that's sort of where they're initially providing services to. But with any of the ambulance services, they move anywhere across the county. And in fact, they can be moved outside of the county by the province of Ontario. So I think it's a little bit misleading just to look and see that it is for BAM, because they certainly would provide services beyond BAM if required. And the next slide, please. Operational expenses that are continued. You can see here our inflationary costs and adjusted costs for IT services. The cost reductions or decreases, kudos to Jennifer and her staff. They looked at a variety of different ways that we could also try and squeeze some of those costs. I think they're fairly straightforward. The transition costs that you see are, we did have provisions when the contract with Medivy was first struck, that if we moved to a different service provider, there would be costs for discontinuing that service. Those costs go down year over year as the number of people that were on staff with us when the contract was originally transferred to Medivy. There's fewer those folks as they retire, so that transition cost continues to go down. But the contingency staff for upstaffing and so on is when there's a requirement to bring in additional staff if people are not present due to sickness or there's some deal. But we actually have a reduction as a result of that. The capital expenses. Jennifer has been working with the Medivy staff to take a look at some of the modeling we have for the asset management, and really happy to report that there's a much better handle on the inventory and the requirements for replacement of equipment, in particular capital equipment. The way our contract is set up is that the county owns the capital equipment, anything that's sort of an extended life cycle. The Medivy contract would provide for what I will say is consumables, bandages and so on that they'd use. But we do have a requirement, as we do with all of our assets, to continue to reinvest in those as part of an asset management plan. And as a result of some good work by both Medivy and Jennifer and her team, they've got a much better handle on what those costs are going to be. So that's what's reflected here in terms of our capital costs. So I think the recommendations before you, the only other thing I'd add is that we're not unique in the province of Ontario to have a contracted service provider, but it does provide a number of advantages, not only being, we believe, cost effective, but it also allows the municipality to share or reduce our risks for a number of different expenses related to this, and whether that's staff on long-term disability or whatever. There's a real advantage to the municipal, or to the county rather, to have some of these service providers, and I'd say that Medivy is a very all of the staff there provided great service to the community, and we're fortunate to have a good partner in them to deliver this service. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Don. Yes, it's interesting where you can where you found some savings. It really is. Does anyone have any question? Deputy Warden, Counselor Sloan? It's a contracted service. It is what it is. Yeah, okay. Jenna, we're good.
Be it resolved that the ambulance services operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay. Moved by Deputy Warden Jones, seconded by Counselor Sloan. All in favor? Yep, there we go. And it's carried. Thank you. 6:12, Manager of Emergency Services, Emergency Measures 2024 Budget Presentation. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to the committee, good afternoon. I'm excited to be able to speak to the proposed 2024 budget for the Emergency Management Department. I've only been here a year, as some of you know, but I'm happy with where things are at after this year and where we're going. We are responsible in the department for sort of three facets. First is the emergency management. So that is the emergency management programs for the county and 5 of our lower tier municipalities. So this would incorporate emergency response plans, hazard identification risk assessments, critical infrastructure, exercises, program committees, provincial compliance, and then on top of that, incident management during the events themselves. We also ensure that all municipalities are meeting their legislative requirements under the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act and Ontario Regulation 38004. The other facet of the department that we deal with is the operation of the Elgin Middlesex Regional Fire School. So firefighters will attend training from across Ontario, including St. Thomas and our 7 lower tier municipalities. Now, for our 7 lower tier municipalities in Elgin County, specifically, we offer fire training services under a shared service agreement. And in 2022, the province mandated that the firefighters in Ontario, all firefighters full-time as well as volunteer, be NFPA certified in the disciplines that they participate in by July 1st, 2026, and the same date for 2028 for technical rescue disciplines. So the operation of the fire school allows a cost-effective option for the 447 firefighters that we have here in Elgin County. To obtain the necessary training to be able to meet their provincial regulations under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act and Ontario Regulation 340-322. And the final facet that we deal with in the department is we assist the CAO in oversight of the Elgin's emergency medical services contract. Next slide, please. So I found that the 2024 budget survey did not speak directly to the emergency management department either. However, much like the CAO announced, one of the common themes that we observed in many of the responses was a need and a desire for increased efficiency in departmental budgets and spending. So with this in mind, we actively sought out opportunities to increase efficiency, such as applying for provincial funding and grant programs, as well as utilizing existing county assets, such as the fleet vehicle for transportation of equipment. So both of these things will enable the department to be more efficient and allow us to do more without actually altering the budget significantly. Next slide, please. Thank you. In regard to inflation, I think everyone is seeing and feeling the effects of inflation this year. And so it was really important to try to mitigate that without simply asking for more money. So we took a deep dive into our operations and budget and looked for ways to push our dollars further while incorporating inflation into the existing budget wherever possible. So as mentioned, we found opportunities for increased funding through the province, increase our efficiencies, tightening up our belt in terms of the things that we are already doing within the department, and as well as pursued avenues to increase revenue in order to offset costs of additional resources that we require within the department. Next slide, please. With regard to the service delivery review, the funding opportunities that I've mentioned will allow us the opportunity to engage in collaborative procurement. So we are able to source the training opportunities, public education materials, reception center and evacuation center resources, collaboratively to be shared across the county. With regard to the council's strategic plan, our department, like many departments, are centered around service. It's our entire focus. So speaking directly to the council's strategic goal of serving Elgin, we align our programs and services that we offer with the needs of the communities across the county. We actively address these needs while developing relationships with our community partners and stakeholders through our emergency management programs and our fire service training. And lastly, we align with our corporate goals. So through our work with our partners and shared service agreements, we strive to strengthen our community partnerships, provide innovative and collaborative quality service to our lower tiers and the residents of Elgin County, as well as seize opportunities for improvements and increased efficiencies and increased funding opportunities and revenue. Next slide, please. So you will notice that we have broken out the department budget to show a closer look at emergency management side of the department as well as the fire school side separately. So incorporated into the emergency management side, wages and benefits for staff as well as the general emergency management expenses. You will notice that for expenses, there is no increase from 2023 to 2024. With the application for the Legacy Oil and Gas Wells program funding through MNRF, as well as the Municipal Emergency Preparedness Grant through EMO, we anticipate being able to offer improved services to all of our lower tier municipalities without the increased costs. The only increase that you will note on the board here is just over $10,000 increase, and that is due to the 2.5% placeholder increase for wages and benefits. And I will note that that does also include the step increases for new staff. Next slide. Oh, perfect. Oh, sorry. There we go. When it comes to the fire school side of the budget, you will notice some changes. And we'll go through those quickly, but line by line. In 2023, the wages and benefits expenses and expected or projected $130,000 worth of revenue. We were looking at a net operating budget of just over $52,500 with $10,000 of capital budget for textbooks. Now, as of November 7th, we are sitting at just over or just under, $112,000 for the revenue. However, once the remainder of the courses have been invoiced this year, we are anticipating to exceed the $130,000 that is projected, which is great and something we are proud of because it is an improvement from 2022, where the school actually saw a deficit in its first year. So as we look at the proposed budget for 2024, there's 3 areas where we will see changes: revenue, wages and benefits, and expenses. With revenue, we are looking at an increase from $130,000 projected in 2023 to $230,000 projected in 2024. And there are a few factors that are influencing this increase. So first, the school operates, as you know, on a cost recovery basis. So what is spent to facilitate the operation of the fire school and run our courses is charged back through the fees to each fire department participating in the training, as well as charged through the levies to our lower tier municipalities as per our original agreement. But as we did that deep dive that I was talking about into our budget and our operations, we did notice that not all costs were actually being recovered as they should have been with the model that was previously in place. So a portion of the increased revenue will be from improved cost recovery. Something that has also been realized over the last couple of years of operation is the significant workload that is involved in facilitating the fire school, specifically through the school's most demanding time of year, which is January to May, when we run our fire recruit training program. This has also been evident by the number of banked hours submitted by previous department staff, as well as the additional time worked by current staff, which I will note has not been banked in order to align with our internal bank time policy. The workload with regard to the fire school, unfortunately, is not sustainable with the current number of staff that we have in the department. So we require the addition of a full-time fire training coordinator to assist with the fire school. Now, you will notice that with the revenue being increased by increasing our course costs slightly and our fees, we can actually increase the revenue needed to offset the additional cost of the full-time employee while also remaining competitive in the industry. And I've had in preparation for for this budget and the budget presentation. I've had discussions with the fire chiefs across Elgin County. And their support of the additional staff member, despite the additional course costs, was unanimous. The cost to send our firefighters to another training facility would be exponentially higher despite the increased course fees that we're suggesting. So this still offers a significant savings by comparison. In addition, we also saw an increase in participants from across Ontario in 2023 compared to 2022. And so we are reaching fire services, both full-time and volunteer, from Windsor to Ottawa and as far north as Timmins in Northern Ontario. So we've got quite a huge number of services that are coming down and utilizing our services for training. This also has contributed to the increase in revenue for this year as well. And we anticipate that this trend will continue as our reputation grows as being a high quality training center for fire service personnel. And that's something that our department is very proud of as well. Although I do feel that it is important to note that when we were calculating the projected revenue for 2024, that those projections were based solely on actual numbers that we saw in 2023, not what we're hoping to see in 24. For wages and benefits, the changes that you'll see are almost entirely a reflection of the additional staff member. We anticipate the staff member to sit at approximately a level 8, although that would be pending HR review. However, also included in this increase is the 2.5% placeholder increase for wages and benefits. With regard to expenses, you'll see just over $11,000 increase from 2023 to 2024. And as noted in the chart underneath, $6,100 is to align with the actual amortization that we experienced or that we can expect for previous purchases such as EOC or Emergency Operations Center equipment and textbooks. And we are proposing an increase of $5,000 for vehicle costs and maintenance in order to utilize the existing engineering fleet vehicle. In 2023, the department actually saw expenses of over $7,000 in rental vehicles, transport vehicles or services, and mileage in order to transport the equipment for fire school courses to and from the training centers. So in utilizing the existing fleet vehicle, it will allow us to more efficiently use existing county assets, as well as see a cost savings in the department by comparison. So with all the changes that we've discussed, you will see ultimately a $10,000 increase to the net operating costs. So if we look at the significant improvements, efficiencies, and additional resources within the department, I think it's a good value for the dollar in terms of just being all of this for just under $11,000 increase. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the provincial funding that we're applying for will allow us to improve shared services without the financial impact of a budget increase. The improved cost recovery will allow us to increase our revenue, which will offset the cost of adding a fire training coordinator to the department. And improved efficiency using the existing fleet vehicle and grant-funded trailer for equipment transport will allow cost savings compared to current methods of transport. Next slide, please. So in closing, I would ask the committee consider our budget for the 2024 county budget. And I am also requesting that the request to add a fire training coordinator be considered for approval at the next council meeting in December. The reason being is being able to move forward with the hiring process for the additional staff member will be significantly helpful and critical as we approach our 2024 recruit season that starts in January. So thank you for your time and your consideration. Happy to take questions if you have them.
Thank you, Andrea. Well done on your first budget iteration with us.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Andrea? Yes, Councillor Sloan.
I don't understand. Would you like to explain to us a little bit about why you'd need an additional fire training coordinator? Explain to me how you have right now, because I thought you already had one, and what the additional person's responsibility would be, please.
So at present, dealing with the fire school side of the department, it is myself and the administrative assistant. And the necessary, the workload just in general, has, to be quite honest with you, has me working more than 2 full-time jobs at present to maintain the work that I am doing across the department, as well as specifically for the fire school. So it would simply be just trying to even out the workload between taking a little bit off of my plate, taking a little bit off of the administrative assistant's plate. Being able to move props around, equipment around, does take quite a bit of time. However, it's necessary for the school to function. And just in terms of dealing with some of the communication, if you will, as well, with Ontario Fire College, academic standards and evaluations, and being that consistent person to handle some of the training and scheduling of instructors as well.
Okay, thank you,
So-
Andrea. Don, please. Don's gonna jump in here for a minute, Counselor.
Just further in answer to Councillor Sloan's question, not only did I have a chance to observe Andrea's workload over the course of the last 5 months, but we also went back and took a look at the previous fire coordinators. They were working so many hours. At one point, Jeff had worked so many hours that he literally had to take the summer off in order to get his loo time in. And so basically what was happening is 100% of his time was being spent on the fire training school. Virtually no time was allocated to emergency management, and even though that was sort of part of the budget. So when we went back, we tried to reestablish the budget, recognizing that the terms of reference for fire training was to be a cost recovery model. So we tried to apportion this new additional staffing as a reflection of what the true costs were. I think what we had before is the only way we got by is we had both Andrea and her predecessor working somewhere in the order of a minimum of 45 or 50 hours a week. It was, well, she's smiling at me, pointing up. I don't think you can see that on the camera, but it's many, many hours. So we did a hard dive on this and crunched the numbers and said, the only way it becomes sustainable without us risking either burning out our staff or having constant turnover is to make sure that we had some additional staff and we charge people the appropriate costs. And so this is really being covered
Just
by
let me
the
interrupt.
increased
Sorry,
revenue.
Don, I apologize, but if it's budget committee and I'm not an HR person, why is this being asked of us to take something to council about adding a position? I mean, you can tell me that it's necessary. Maybe it is necessary. Can it be contracted? It can be part-time. I'm talking about the budget for the department. So respectfully, I don't know why this is being asked through the budget committee. Maybe you could enlighten me. Thank you.
I'm honestly not sure how to answer your question. My past practice has been that if there's any changes in the staffing requirement for a department, it would be presented through the budget process on an annual basis. Certainly, it's going to have to be something that would be dealt with by council as a whole. But that's the only time I've ever actually seen it, changed on, unless it's sort of a crisis basis. But if there's changes to the staff complement, normally I'm used to that coming through the budget as we're presenting today.
Good, thank you. I just wanted clarification because I didn't understand.
Yeah, no, thanks. Jennifer is confirming that I think that's consistent with past practice of the county. But I think the big piece, and I think what both Andrea and Jennifer have worked on, is making sure that the adjustments in the fees for the fire services training cover all of those additional costs. So the taxpayer is not being asked to make any additional contribution. This is something that's being covered off by the actual people taking the courses are paying for it. And as Andrea's described, we went to some effort to make sure that the fire chiefs supported the changes because they knew that it was still a very, very cost-effective model. So I'm confident the staff's done their due diligence on that part.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm not sure if this is going through to Andrea or or Don, or Jennifer. So what would happen if you increase the fees to our participants in fire school $10 per head? That would cover a lot of the $10,000, wouldn't it? To add, or is that just putting us out of reach? I know for Southold, if we're sending them down to Ajax or up to Fire College or even Sarnia, and the guys are staying over on a weekend, and it gets very, very expensive. And if even our local guys are taking the courses, it seems like $10 is a very small amount extra on top of whatever you're going to increase the cost anyway. I just wonder if that is an option.
I think they're looking for more like $250 a head. You got 400 people that go through a year and you're looking for $100,000 increase in your fees, right?
Correct, yeah. So if we look at the revenue, on the revenue side, you will notice the projected revenue increase from 130,000 to 230,000. And in order to do that, yes, we have realized where we can increase better cost recovery. However, the majority of that is increasing our course fees. So it would actually be increasing our catalog prices by, say, $100 per course. So as opposed to $10 per firefighter, we're actually looking at $100. Now it was a bit of work to do the research in order to make certain that we were increasing costs in order to cover our costs. However, also remain consistent in terms of being competitive in the industry. And so it was just trying to find that sweet spot. And so that's what we have been able to do. And I do foresee this to be a very successful model going forward.
Yes, please.
Just a supplemental, yeah, no, I realized we had a bit significant increase. I was just actually for another $10 on top, but so the 10,000 is essentially will be diverted onto other things that you're not able to do in your allotted time during the week. So I guess the extra person, that extra $10,000 is going to be attributed outside of Fire College.
Yes, I think the additional $10,000 is what is being added, what we are requesting over and above. Now, that being said, as I mentioned, in order to be consistent, I guess, and to be the most accurate we can be, we projected that revenue based on numbers that we saw this year. Now, the numbers we saw this year increased from 2022. I anticipate that the numbers that we see in terms of people taking our courses, class sizes. I know when the school was implemented, it was, I'm looking for the word. It was proposed that we would have 100% capacity in our courses. And unfortunately, it hasn't turned out to be the case. However, I do anticipate that the capacities will increase. However, to be the most accurate possible, we've projected that revenue based on 2023 numbers. So we could actually quite realistically see a higher revenue than the $230,000, in which case, that would just go back into the pool to offset those costs.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you, Andrea.
Yeah.
Ready for you.
Be it resolved that the emergency measures operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date, and that the request for an additional fire training coordinator be forwarded to County Council for consideration at its December 6th, 2023 meeting.
Okay, mover and seconder. Counselor Sloan, thank you. And Deputy Warden Jones, all in favor? We are carried. Is everyone good or need a break? Need a stretch? Can we take a 10-minute stretch? Okay.
I'll be back.
Thank you. All righty, thank you. Oh, well. Welcome back. We've left off at 6:13, Director of Financial Services, Treasurer.
Andrew is signaling if I don't know.
We're good? Okay, we're doing the financial services budget presentation. Jen, please.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to the Budget Committee. The Financial Service Department is responsible for the preparation of the annual budgets, the audited financial statements, and the procurement of contracted services that ensures the county is compliant with governing legislation. All Ontario municipalities are required to appoint a treasurer who is responsible for handling all financial affairs of the municipality on behalf and in the manner directed by council of the municipality. Effective accounts payable, accounts receivable, and payroll processing is essential to ensure that the county can deliver municipal services as planned. Next slide. Who we are, the Financial Services Department is responsible for, no, I'm doing that again, sorry. How did your department take into consideration the 2024 budget survey results? Acceptable ways to increase spending on core services were to find efficiencies and decrease spending in other service and program areas. So throughout the budget process, staff reviewed each line of the budget and took into consideration all avenues available for us to maximize funding while reducing costs in all departments. Acceptable tax increases were highest noted in the 0 to 2% range. CPI this year in October was 3.3%, and pressures related to non-union or to union negotiations are still ongoing throughout the county and through the ambulance services. We use 2.5 as a placeholder in all departments for wage increases, other than where there was step increases. While staff recognize that wage negotiations in the healthcare sector for long-term care nursing and ambulance put pressure on the system, it may not be containable to stay within the range of 0 to 2%, using cost offsets as the only option. So it is difficult to continue to offset inflation by saving costs every year and deliver budgets below inflation. Receiving good value for your tax dollars, review priority spending and services and better planning. Requests for funding from the hospital, the MRI and hospice were discussed at a budget committee meeting and removed at this time for consideration as they fell outside of our core services and could add up to 4% to the levy. This would have to have been funded by tax increases. So staff are looking for those spending and efficiencies in all of the areas of the county. How did your department take into consideration inflationary pressures in your department? So not every line of our budget is increased by inflation just because inflation is increasing. It's not our practice just because it exists to include inflation, and not every line of the budget in every department is increased. So many of the line items are held to their prior year budget unless there is justification for increases. As an example, mileage expense lines are held within the same level unless there is evidence that their annual allotment cannot be contained. So departments are asked to move within line items where possible and not add to budget if they need to increase this area. Travel other could be contained for using other methods such as attending virtual meetings rather than in-person meetings. And we also look for other efficiencies throughout the county that help to offset costs. So one of the areas that we have helped to support, through capital funding is LED lighting and automated light shutoffs that after a certain amount of time, the light shut off, automatic hand washing so that you don't have to touch the hand washing. So that makes it more efficient because it's on for only the time that your hands are under the water. So we have all experienced the lights going off in our offices, and so we have to get up and move around in order to make those come back on. So that's just one of our little things that we have here. That's one of our ongoing jokes, but it is more efficient at the end of the day. So how does your department prioritize linked how do your departmental priorities link back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate departmental plans? Service delivery review, improvements to manual processes using technology, transition to cloud-based payroll and scheduling software is almost complete. And we've done this in conjunction with HR and our homes departments. So this has been a joint effort throughout the county in order to modernize that portion of our service. We've received approval to modernize further. And right now there's an RFP out for our budget software, and updates to accounting software and reporting module are coming shortly. We have shared services in the area of purchasing, and our process was created in 23 for our IT department, which now shares services with the provider. So we look for the most efficient way to purchase IT equipment using our provider vendors as well. And we've offered that service out to our local municipal partners who are sharing IT services with us as well. There's also opportunities that exist through our county membership in the Elgin Middlesex Oxford Purchasing Group. And I know that some of our local municipal partners do take advantage of that through Mike's team in our department. How are your departmental priorities linked back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate department plans? Through council strategic plans serving Elgin, ensure alignment of program and services. We engage the public through the budget survey every year to obtain public opinion and gauge service satisfaction. We ensure that the budget is aligned with the service delivery review and areas of focus for that year. And we encourage departments to engage with local municipal partners and ensure that projects are aligned to provide efficiency and reduce costs where necessary. So if you're doing a roads project, you'll be working with Peter's team to make sure that if you're putting services under the ground and we put services on top of the ground, that's all coordinated and it aligns well with our strategic delivery. Growing Elgin is exploring opportunities to promote and facilitate development. We're exploring opportunities to support and obtain funding and be ready to support departments in their mandates to attract new business and jobs. Investing in Elgin, delivering programs and services efficiently and effectively. We ensure that we have the necessary tools and resources and infrastructure to deliver on our mandated programs now and into the future, and make sure that we have the money for everyone to do their jobs as they need. In other corporate documents that we do rely on are the budget, and the budget does guide our work every year internally and externally. So within our department, we are a service delivery department, so we don't have a lot of capital. The items that we have are mostly wage related, and we have a lot of new staff in our department this year. So we have a lot of step increases that are coming up, which are just in alignment with their years of service. As well, we did have some of our, one of our team's wages were part of the IT department as they were delivering service through the AP system for IT. So that is now rolled into the finance department. So that has increased our wage, but decreased the IT side of things. So increases are mainly related to wage increases and the addition of the 9,000 that was moved from IT department. And the new software that we have coming forward will be handled through the information technology budget. So there's no additional increase to our budget for that. Goals for our 2024 year are to, as we roll out new software, we're going to be looking at our processes to make sure that we're efficient and streamlined. We're going to keep software versions current so that we don't sunset unexpectedly. Streamline our budget delivery, hopefully with our new budget software. Improve our monthly reporting for managers and council. Continue our public engagement. And improve our year-end reporting timelines. And hopefully all this will help reduce workload with efficiencies. And our recommendation is before you. If there's any questions, related to finance, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you very much, Jen, for that presentation. I think you're absolutely correct. You know, the finance group is there's not much, there isn't any revenue side. It's a necessary expense ongoing with the corporation. You've already explained where the 50,000 increase is coming from. I'm not sure if I have any questions other than that. I'll look to Councillor Sloan and Deputy Warden Jones if they have any questions or concerns on this particular budget. Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Thank you. Jenna, please.
Be it resolved that the financial services operating budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay, moved by Deputy Warden Jones. And seconded by Councillor Sloan. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Which brings us to the Director of Information Technology budget.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to Budget Committee. The Information Technology Services Department is responsible for the stable, reliable, and secure operation of the county's server and network infrastructure. The county ITS provides services to the municipalities of Bayham and Central Elgin as well. Why we do it? This is a critical service in order to effectively and efficiently deliver municipal services and plays an integral role in the transformation of county service delivery to modernize digital alternatives. How did your department take into consideration the budget survey results? Comments that we received did not specifically identify initiatives for the information technology department. However, there was a call for us to do more with less, and partially this can be achieved through modernization and software to enable better data collection and efficiencies. Data collection and timely distribution supports better decision-making by department managers, and plans for our needs now and into the future will enable us to move forward with a strategy that supports other departments and enables more ability to share services using technology. How did your department take into consideration inflationary pressures? The budget is contained predominantly within the footprint of the prior year. Increases in inflation are being managed by savings on other line items as much as we are able. And we plan to carry forward unspent capital from 2023 into 2024 for ongoing hardware equipment. How are your departmental priorities linked back to the service delivery review, council strategic plan, and other corporate documents? Increasing the scale of our shared IT service will improve its effectiveness. Joint IT group was created with the local municipal partners who do participate this year and who do share our services. And this is helping us to determine needs within and across the county. Investing in Elgin is part of the council strategic plan. So we are prioritizing IT services to improve the county functions in the short term, leading digital transformation across Elgin County. And currently we are involved in transformation of the website, and Office 365 updates are in progress. Other county documents, we are reevaluating our hardware needs as we move into cloud-based and technical solutions. At this time, we are increasing our revenue a little bit in order to be more in line with what we expect for next year. We're moving wages and benefits are decreasing and moving over to a portion going to finance and the rest going over to consultant to support our consulting partner Stronghold, who is our IT service provider at the back end. We expect annual increases of approximately 54,000 in expense lines. This is more related to software, and with an actual decrease to amortization in the amount of $11,000. And for capital, we are decreasing 110,000. We are carrying that forward though into 2024. So we aren't losing those dollars. We just don't need them again in 2024. And we're offsetting that increase by an annualized amount in hardware of approximately $6,000. So a net decrease to budget of $82,000. So some of our savings, as I said, was related to the server capital not needing to be continued. However, we do have funds available in the budget in the outlying years every 5 years for replacement. Spending has been shifted to better reflect expected actuals, and operating increases marginally add to the existing budget plan. So our 2024 needs review and reevaluate our needs related to service delivery review, which will include additional shared opportunities for shared services and cloud-based solutions in 2024. So we are downloading success, but we do have to wait. Things take time. So that's the proposed budget for technology, information technology for 2024. So I'd be happy to answer any questions related to that.
Thank you, Jen. I have a question offhand. The first in your budget summary talks about funds available every 5 years for replacement. Does the current budget this year include a component that will be going into a reserve to help build that, or are you looking in year 5 to come back for something off the levy?
That is what we normally have done in the past.
Which
we have increased it every 5 years. So we don't have a reserve for information technology specifically. But we do annualize it through amortization. So we do have an amortization budget in there that.
All right. Well, I'm just thinking of strategies in order to eliminate those blips that tend to crop up when you need to make a larger one-time purchase. That's all.
Mhm.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Andrew, you're good? Okay. Good job.
It's good.
Be it resolved that the Information Technology Services operating and capital budget as presented be included for consideration as part of the 2024 budget to be confirmed at a later date.
Okay, moved by Counselor Sloan.
Sure. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. And seconded by Deputy Warden Jones. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. 6:15, Director of Financial Services, closing remarks. The last word.
To you, Mr. Warden, to the Budget Committee. So at this point, we're looking like we're closing out a little earlier than we expected today. So that's great. Everyone was very efficient in delivering their message. So hopefully there's no further outstanding items that we need to address other than we will bring back some other information about the planner when we come forward the next time. The final 2023 assessment from the Municipal Property Tax Corporation is an outstanding item. So the final assessment is expected to be delivered to us or made available to us through MPAC on December 4th. And that will then inform us further as to what our levy will be for 2024. That's the base amount that we use. We still have unknown amounts for social services. I believe the city is currently deliberating their budget, so we should have that information soon. And we have not learned of the levy yet from the Southwest Public Health, which I think should be coming soon as well. Other items are the Corporate Services Department and the Corporate Activities Department are the departments that are still outstanding. And those are the departments that also include the levy, the changes to the Southwest Public Health, the social services, and also any of the other things like SCORE are in there. So that is sort of an overall view of what the corporation will use to fund this year's budget. So hopefully that will be able to be done shortly and within good time. I don't expect that we are going to have any changes to the ratios unless there is any appetite to review that at this time. I have not heard that there's any changes expected in any of the other areas as in prior years. So that would be up to the budget committee to determine if they wanted that
Right.
done. And then I think from there, we would determine whether we need another meeting in December or if we wanted to wait until January to do that final review.
Okay, please, Deputy Warden Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. With regards to the art, Public Arts Center and SCORE, they've all both had requests for increases. We'll deal with that at the next meeting. So,
Yes.
That as well as, if we want to think about the health recruitment partnership. There's an
Oh,
increase
that's-
there as well.
yes.
Correct. Yeah, I made some comments yesterday and I know I made them probably around within a closed session, but still, the point being that and we'll have a conversation on that as well. I think some of the requests that are coming are modest and probably well deserved and needed. My comments were going to go back to the ratio side and thinking that until we really know what a picture of what the levies, or let's call it the tax rate, till we know what the tax impact is going to be, it's premature for us to make any comments on the ratios. I know years ago, council agreed to roll back the tax ratio on the farmland with the expectation that once that roll book got updated, probably roll it back to where it was at the 0.25. We still have yet to see that roll book return to us, and it's another one of those sore points that's out there 7 years old and getting older every day. So I agree with what the treasurer is telling us. Probably don't expect any ratio changes, but until we see what the tax rate is going to be, it's premature. Looking for, I guess, some consensus around the council until we have some more information. Is there any expectation that the committee needs to meet in December? I don't see it myself. I think so too. I think the process this year is well advanced to what it was last year. And I congratulate staff on that. My goal down the road would always be to get you even backed up further into the fall, take advantage of some of those contract efficiencies and pricing mechanisms are out there, but we're getting better. Councillor Sloan, do you have any comments?
Oh, all good. Thank you. It's a learning experience for me. As Don points out, sometimes I'm asking some questions that he, as he quote said, didn't know how to answer, but I'll know for next time. So thank you.
Life is a learning process, my friend. Absolutely.
You're getting a much more knowledgeable guy that's coming on now with Blaine. He's
Oh,
been able to
Don,
sit
you
in on
sell
all
yourself
the
short.
conversations, so. No,
Through you, Warden, that it won't be the same without our friend Don.
You're right.
thank you, Councillor Sloan.
All right then. So the next steps will be December to be determined.
I would suggest we look for a meeting in January then. I can bring forward some further information and perhaps I would have some preliminary levy information for this committee at that time.
Right. Right. Okay, that's perfect. So that closes off your section then. Okay, so moving on with the agenda, we have other business, which we don't, correspondence, the correspondence from the Elgin St. Thomas Public Arts Center request. That's the one that was received by council and forwarded to the committee. So that would be it in that corporate services budget.
In just as if I may, Mr. Warden, the public arts one was included in the museum budget when Brian presented it. It's a 10,000 increase that was presented in that budget because that's where that particular one lies within the county. So it was presented today within the museum budget.
Doesn't seem like consistent treatment, does it?
I
Deputy
bet,
Warden?
I missed that one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't see it as a line, but yeah.
He did mention it. but
Really?
I agree with you. I didn't recall the line. What's the argument for, well, then, I guess you really can't group the Health Recruitment Partnership in with EMS or anything like this, and can you? No, it's a different. Yeah,
I know a representative on the art, never come up with it. Anyway, she's not really agreeable to what the public art has presented as far as the budget goes. She has some concerns with it, so.
we asked for details. Is this what this letter is the details?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay,
I think probably at a public meeting, Councilor Jiguer may express those concerns.
okay, perfect.
If you want that to be brought out separately for further.
Well, if this is going to be, well, this, you're right, this.
As I understand it, nothing's approved today.
No.
This has just been received, so
Yeah.
whether it's in the package that's included within Brian's budget, or whether it's in a separate standalone package, I'm not fussed. I just think for the benefit of all of council, we need to find a way to, put a spotlight on all the additional asks that are, what I think I've heard in council chambers referred to as, non-essential or discretionary type expenses, and those can be considered when the budget's presented to council.
Yes.
But we don't want to lose it, that's for sure, or treat it differently than we're using the other requests.
So if I'm hearing, then find a way to highlight it and bring it back with the corporate services budget in January.
Yes, I'll make a note of that.
Okay, thank you. Do we need anything else on that particular? There is no motion for that. We could, or it could be simply deferred to the discussion on the corporate services. Either will work,
We can re-include it in the next agenda.
please. If that's a consensus of committee, and that it would work. Okay, let's do that. Brings us to 9. We have no closed meeting items. And the date and time for the next meeting will be determined. Which brings us to the adjournment motion. We're ahead of schedule. Deputy Warden Jones,
Want me to read it first?
if you wish.
Okay. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 3:26 PM to meet again at the call of the chair.
Okay, and I'm hoping Counselor Sloan will second that,
Thank you.
and we'll call the question. Carried, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating today, Andrew. You do look better
Thanks.
today than you did yesterday.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, every day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Take care.